Main Street Capital Access Act. As a former community bank founder and CEO in my hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, I've seen firsthand the important role that our community banks and credit unions play to drive the economic engine of America and help Main Street grow and thrive. During the financial crisis, they were there. During the COVID pandemic, they were there, staying up all night to close emergency paycheck protection loans. Every member of this body knows this and knows it well. They have their own story from their own town about how that local financial institution was there for a customer, for a family, to help a startup, to help a business or a restaurant cope with the pandemic. Community banks and hometown credit unions know their customers. They understand the needs of their communities, and they keep capital flowing where it's needed most. When a family is trying to buy their first home, they often walk into the offices of a community bank where that lender knows them, recognizes their goals, and is invested in their success. And Mr. Speaker, as I've said on this House floor many times this year, our banks under $10 billion make 6 out of 10 home construction loans. When a local farmer or entrepreneur needs the capital to expand or initiate their crop for the year, they need someone who understands their particular business and is committed to seeing them succeed and thereby their community succeed. I loved my role as a hometown Main Street community banker and investor. Even to this day, almost 3 decades later, I smile driving by that restaurant location that I helped grow, or driving by a building or a shopping center or a doctor's building that our small bank helped finance its construction, finance its future, finance its home for those employees. Community banks make that possible, and this bipartisan Main Street Capital Access Act gives them the tools they need to keep capital flowing where it's needed most on our main streets up and down our beautiful country. For decades, Washington has made it harder for community banks to thrive and operate efficiently. The Dodd-Frank Act, passed in the heat and horror of the global financial crisis, took the approach that many community and mid-sized banks across our nation were faced with the same rules and the same level of scrutiny that the largest, most systemically important institutions. It was just too much, Mr. Speaker. And that approach, that overkill, has stifled local lending, constrained economic growth, accelerated industry consolidation, something I hear about from members on both sides of the aisle all the time, and pushed activity, important financing activity for both families and business, out of the regulated financial sector. Again, I don't believe that was a goal by the proponents of Dodd-Frank after the financial crisis. Our local lenders, Mr. Speaker, too often now spend more time in check-the-box compliance requirements rather than serving their communities. When I made my presentation to our party here in the House to chair our Financial Services Committee, I said that the impact of Dodd-Frank and other rules had focused Main Street bank presidents staying up all night worrying not about their loan pipeline, not about where to get their next lending officer, but instead they're up all night wondering how they can afford another compliance officer to try to meet this standard that is, in my judgment, unreasonable for a small, straightforward local bank. Our committee Republicans, with their great leadership from our subcommittee chair, Andy Barr of Kentucky, have worked mightily over the years to find a bipartisan set of solutions to exactly the problem I outlined today. Recently, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act that became law contained 9 community banking provisions that provide this sort of thematic, clear, needed relief to America's local lenders and expand financing for both residential mortgages and housing construction and development. These measures today that we're debating today in the Main Street Capital Access Act are in that same philosophy of what we just overwhelmingly passed in both chambers just a few days ago. So today, Mr. Speaker, I say we're building on the success of our 21st Century Housing Act with Main Street Capital Access. We're expanding access to capital, supporting American business, ensuring our financial system remains the most dynamic and diverse in the world. And this bill delivers on those goals. It spurs formation of new banks. It brings back this common sense tailoring back to regulation. It restores fairness and transparency in bank supervision. It helps banks attract, retain, and diversify important funding sources from sources of deposits. And it removes unnecessary barriers that have limited lending in communities across this country. Mr. Speaker, with all this effort, we've seen solid bipartisan support, input, and leadership in developing this bill. Expanding access to capital strengthens our local economies. It gives entrepreneurs the confidence to invest, businesses the ability to grow, and families the opportunity to build long-term wealth through that most abundant of American dreams, their own home. When Main Street banks succeed, our communities thrive. And I want to again thank my colleague, my friend, the chairman of our subcommittee on financial institutions, Andy Barr of Kentucky, for his tireless effort in developing this bill and his commitment to strengthening community banking, not only in Kentucky, but across our nation. Then I also want to thank his hard-working colleague who has spent hours tirelessly thinking through the best approach to these provisions, and that's Congressman Bill Foster of Chicago. Their collaboration will benefit our country, and I hope that we see a strong bipartisan vote on this bill in this chamber today. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
From Arkansas reserves, the gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Let me start by saying we all care about community banks and credit unions. For that reason, I was pleased to work with Chair Hill on a package of community bank provisions included in our landmark housing bill, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. Now, even though Trump refused to sign it, that legislation has become the law of the land. And that law not only will get America back in the business of building housing, but it will help community lenders provide mortgages and other types of finance to support the American dream of home ownership. Importantly, that bill did not have handouts for mega banks, big tech, payday lenders, debt collectors, or credit bureaus. But that is not the case for the bill that is before us today. H.R. 6955, Wall Street deregulation, that's what it is, hiding as a community bank bill. This package is made up of 24 Republican bills with just 2 Democratic bills. And today, we mark the 16th anniversary of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act being signed into law. That's the law that bears the name of the late, great, and former Chairman Barney Frank. And unlike President Trump, President Obama knew when to sign a good bill when he saw it. That law was passed in response to the 2008 financial crisis, when, in case my Republican colleagues have forgotten, millions of Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. But H.R. 6955 ignores these lessons and rolls back a long list of safeguards and oversight of the largest banks. Importantly, the nation is grappling with an affordability crisis and surge in financial scams and fraud, costing consumers tens of billions of dollars. This is all made worse when Trump has shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Voting for H.R. 6955 would add insult to injury by thwarting a future CFPB from issuing rules such as fixing credit reporting or reining in debt collectors or abusive medical debt practices. And maybe that is the interesting thing. That is the point. Interestingly, Rules Committee Chairman Fox said in the quiet part out loud yesterday, she confessed Republicans love deregulation. And that's what this bill is all about. Not affordability, not protecting consumers. It's about deregulation for Wall Street's mega banks. What's more, Mr. Speaker, this bill ignores lessons from the failures of Silicon Valley Bank and other regional banks just 3 years ago. Those large regional banks failed after Congress rolled back capital, liquidity, and other rules specifically for those banks. Nevertheless, this bill, it allows even more of these large banks escape critical safeguards, which risk even more failures and harm to Americans and small businesses. If H.R. 6955 were to become law, it would be the most sweeping deregulation of Wall Street since the 2008 financial crisis. Two sections of the bill, sections 203 and 204, amend 15 different banking and consumer protection laws and would increase more than 40 different regulatory thresholds. There's so many laws being rolled back. The committee report for this bill is over 600 pages long, mostly to show how all these different laws are amended. In fact, the sponsors of this bill were so zealous to raise thresholds, they increased 2 thresholds that will aid bad actors who commit fraud against a bank or a large financial institution. You can't make this up. There's a provision that will increase the amount individuals can defraud a bank or future AIG by when then government money to buy those failed assets for their own benefit. The largest labor union in the U.S., the AFL-CIO, and consumer advocates like Americans for Financial Reform and others wrote a letter saying, and I quote, "Taken together, these changes would be more damaging than the sum of their parts, leaving the financial system dramatically weaker and more vulnerable to instability and crisis," quote unquote. Now, Republicans made some technical changes at the request of Trump regulators, but let me give you another example. What they didn't fix. Wells Fargo, which many of you may remember, created millions of fake consumer accounts and has been the subject of countless enforcement actions for consumer harm, like discrimination and anti-money laundering deficiency, would have a new tool to delay future enforcement actions when consumers have been harmed. Mr. Speaker, instead of letting Wall Street put Americans and our economy at risk again, we should be addressing the affordability crisis caused by Trump's failed economic policies and endless war with Iran. And so, I urge members to oppose this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. I want to yield 5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky who's worked tirelessly to assemble this package of bills that will help our Main Street banks and credit unions thrive, grow, better serve their customers, and in turn, be able to see their local economies benefit. And that's the gentleman from Kentucky, chairman of our Subcommittee on Financial Institutions, Andy Barr.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Hill. I want to start by applauding my good friend from Arkansas, Chairman French Hill, for his leadership on this critical legislation. Great work, my friend, great work. And great work for working across the aisle for bipartisan legislation, well-earned bipartisan support for this legislation that will help strengthen Main Street America. The Main Street Capital Access Act is exactly the kind of reform needed to advance this committee's goal of making community banking great again. Over the past 18 months, we've worked hard to develop over 24 banking reform bills, many of them with strong bipartisan support, and combine them into one multifaceted package designed to strengthen our community financial institutions. Not big banks, like the ranking member is referring to, community banks, Main Street banks, mid-sized banks. And if you want to help hold big banks accountable, then what you need is competition. And competition and choice is good for America, good for consumers, and good for financial stability. So I want to first start by, Mr. Speaker, admitting into the record 14 letters of support from the Community Bankers Association, the American Bankers Association, the Bank Policy Institute, the Independent Community Bankers Association of America, the National Association of Home Builders, and others, without objection.
Without objection.
Thank you. And community banks and credit unions are the financial backbone of this country. They finance farms, they finance factories, first-time homebuyers, and the local entrepreneurs who create jobs in every corner of America. These institutions don't just serve communities, they are part of the community. But here's the hard truth. Community banks have suffered under a regulatory framework that forgot who the system should serve. For too long, Washington has been writing rules as if every bank and credit union in America is a trillion-dollar global institution. They are not. They are our hometown banks and community financial institutions. These guardrails that the ranking member talks about rolling back, we're not rolling back guardrails for big multi-trillion-dollar banks. We're talking about small community financial institutions. And the goal is simple. Regulation should follow the risk, not the zip code, not the political fashion. A $500 million community bank in rural Kentucky or rural Arkansas or rural Michigan should not be regulated under the same framework built for a trillion-dollar institution operating around the globe. That means higher costs, fewer loans, more forced consolidation. This hurts everyday Americans by reducing both access to credit and opportunities for small business growth. The Main Street Capital Access Act is about changing that. It is about right-sizing this regulatory framework to ensure that community lenders get back to what they do best, serving their customers and their communities. Main Street opens the door for new bank formation, improving transparency in the chartering process, making applications more predictable, and ensuring rural and underserved communities can once again see new institutions form instead of watching their local banks disappear. You want to hold big banks accountable? Allow new banks to form. It also restores proportionality to regulation, updating capital leverage and enhanced prudential standards so they actually reflect a bank's risk profile, not just an arbitrary static asset threshold. That means less money spent on regulatory gymnastics and more money available for loans in your communities. We are also bringing fairness and due process back to the supervision process. Banks and credit unions should not be governed by opaque examiner preferences. They should be governed by clear, risk-based, and transparent standards that focus on core financial performance rather than footfalls and check-the-box compliance. Main Street also addresses the structural problems that are driving consolidation. This legislation requires regulators to ensure clarity and predictability in the merger process so that healthy banks can grow and troubled banks can find partners before they fail. And it ensures that when banks do fail, like Silicon Valley Bank, community banks aren't shut out of the resolution process by design. Finally, this legislation recognizes reality. Innovation is happening. The question is whether it happens inside the banking system where it's supervised and safe or outside where it isn't. This bill lets banks partner, modernize, and compete. Community banks, Mr. Speaker, are the financial infrastructure of America. Rural America, suburban America, urban America. When they thrive, Small towns thrive, and when they're regulated out of existence, capital dries up and opportunity for local ownership disappears. The Main Street Capital Access Act is a critical step toward restoring the financial backbone of this country. I urge all my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, the ranking member of the Small Business Committee.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank the ranking member for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 6955. Community banks and credit unions are the foundations of our financial system. As ranking member of the House Small Business Committee, I understand better than most the role they play in our communities, offering small business loans, farm loans, and mortgages. They are critical lifelines to our rural and underserved communities that have been left behind by our biggest banks. And while I believe in sensible tailoring to help community banks and credit unions do what they do best, deliver personalized products to meet the needs of their customers, this bill moves far beyond sensible tailoring. Instead of focusing on modest improvements, this package represents the largest amount of bank deregulation since before the financial crisis. It includes sweeping reforms that will not only significantly roll back necessary safeguards and weaken oversight, but it will also undermine consumer protection and anti-discrimination measures and hamper the CSPB ability to issue new rules. This deregulation package will push risk into the shadows and make the next publicly financed bailout more likely. This is especially concerning at a time when financial regulatory agencies are under political attack, pursuing industry-friendly agendas, and are starved of resources. That is why more than 25 labor, consumer, housing, economic justice, and public interest organizations are opposing this bill. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
30 seconds.
I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield to the gentleman from Michigan because he's worked in this House for over a decade, speaking on behalf of Main Street, Michigan. From that real estate community, from his own background, his own business entrepreneurship, that of his family, he knows the value of how our local financial institutions help grow an economy and have more opportunities. So I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, our committee vice chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Mr. Heisinger.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman. As a small business owner, I've seen it. I've lived it. When community banks disappear, families and small businesses lose the local lenders who know their communities and their customers best. Less competition means fewer financing options, higher borrowing costs, and less investment on Main Street, not Wall Street, as some of my colleagues are trying to assert. This bill lowers unnecessary regulatory costs for community and mid-sized banks, not those big business center banks in Wall Street and New York and around the world. In fact, this ends debanking. It restores the flexibility needed to these institutions to better serve you and your family. I'm also pleased that this bill includes 2 of my bills, the FDIC Board Accountability Act, which strengthens governance of the FDIC board on behalf of smaller institutions, and the Enhancing Bank Resolution Participation Act, which simply seeks to bring more qualified bidders into failed bank resolutions when disaster strikes. Better oversight and broader participation can protect depositors. It's going to promote competition. It reduces further concentration in the banking system. And I would think Mr. Speaker, we would want that, but it appears that some on the other side do not. This package makes it easier to form new banks, strengthens local funding and liquidity, and it helps community lenders put more deposits to work, financing homes and small businesses and entrepreneurial dreams. At a time when Americans are struggling with everyday expenses, Washington should not make credit more expensive through needless red tape. H.R. 6955, the Main Street Act, will promote competition. It'll expand access to capital and help make life more affordable for American families. I want to thank the chairman, both of the full committee as well as our subcommittee, and I urge passage and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Let me be clear. Dodd-Frank has not led to bank consolidation. That trend began when Congress repealed Glass-Steagall almost 30 years ago. What Dodd-Frank has done is ensure the longest stretch of economic growth in a generation. The threat to community banks is not Dodd-Frank, but to repeal it and return to the needless of days, the reckless days that led to the 2008 financial crisis. And just last week, we passed my bill as part of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. My bill eased the requirements on new banks. H.R. 6955, however, would set new banks up for failure. In fact, the bill undermines much of what we were trying to accomplish when we worked together in a bipartisan way. And so what we have to do at this point in time is understand a provision of the housing bill that was carefully negotiated. Mr. Speaker, I thought we all were supposed to be in support of the housing bill. Everybody raved about the greatness of it. Not 10 days after it became law, now the opposite side of the aisle are already trying to undo the bill. Now this bill will actually make it easier for more, not less consolidation. The bill is bad for new banks, but great for mega banks. And so let me just say this. We all talk about loving community banks, but I want you to know it is not talk about loving community banks. It's action and what we do for or against them. I want you to know the big mega banks don't even want them in their doors. They don't even want to have those working behind the counter serving us. They have you serving from outside the bank. And when you can get in touch with them, I want you to know you've got to go through a hell of a menu to try to talk with someone that maybe in a community bank you can talk to. You know why we love community banks? Because they understand the community. They know the people in the community. They work with you when you have a problem. The mega banks don't know you, don't care about you, don't do anything to assist you, and hope you can't get through their menus in order to speak with anybody. And so it is not a lot of talk about loving community banks. It is action, what you do. Now, when you come in here talking about how much you love the community banks, yet you know that you can't get the deregulation that you're doing unless you hid behind the community banks. If you love the community banks, all you got to do is work with us to separate the regulations in a way that it does not undermine the community banks. And if you want to be fair, charge all your big friends and all the big banks everything they should be charged with regulation. This is about whether or not you're going to use your power to literally undo what we have worked so hard to do to give the average person a decent chance with a bank, and that's community banks. And so I'm asking for a no vote on your bill because in the final analysis, I know that if you get away with these deregulations, we're going to have consolidation. It'll only be 5 banks, almost only 5 big banks in the country that control everything. And so I'm asking for a no vote, and I yield the balance of my time. Reserve the balance of my
Gentlewoman
time.
from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, let me address that comment that the ranking members articulated, which is that somehow this bill reduces the power of community banks to compete with the big globally systemic banks that she just described. I'd really argue just the contrast. This bill tailors the regulatory compliance so that a bank with a straightforward, simple business plan that's well managed, that's well capitalized, can have a lower tailored compliance cost compared to the one-size-fits-all approach, overwhelming approach that was a part of Dodd-Frank aimed at those big Wall Street, globally systemic banks. Secondly, if you don't want them to grow, then you want community banks to have access to more capital. That's offered in this bill. You want them to be more successful. That's offered in this bill. You want them to be able to buy a failing bank on their own or with partners to compete with the biggest banks in the country who are just simply given banks that need resolution at the FDIC. If a small bank fails in some state, they just let the big banks bid on them. This bill creates competition. Chairman Barr walked through that. This actually increases the chance for entrepreneurs to acquire, unfortunately, the demise of a local bank so that it's not sold to some big Wall Street lender. And I could go on with all the benefits of this bill that is tailored and focused on the growth and success of our Main Street institutions, but I can think of no better person to help me make that case than the gentleman from Georgia, the vice chairman of our Financial Institutions Subcommittee, Mr. Loudermilk. And I give Mr. Loudermilk 2 minutes to make that case.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also thank the chairman of the committee for his hard work on this and including several of my provisions in this bill that is designed for the small guy. I obviously rise in support of H.R. 6955, not only because it's a good bill, but also because I recognize the need to right-size federal regulations and gain more transparency into the financial regulatory process. You know, for too long, federal financial regulators have taken this one-size-fits-all approach. If we applied that same status to ourselves, then let's just issue every member of Congress one suit of clothes, that we all wear the same suit of clothes. Now, we wouldn't accept that because we would have to only have our clothes to fit the largest member of Congress. So what we're saying is that is what we have in the financial services industry right now. We need to tailor the regulations to fit the business model of the business, especially the small business. That's why I'm proud that my Taylor Act has been included into this package. And I can't stress enough the importance of the Taylor Act because it is for the little guy. It's important because it requires all future regulations to be tailored to the risk of the regulated institution. It rewards institutions who adopt sound risk management practices with fewer regulations and punishes those who take an unhealthy amount of risk. I also wish to highlight my new Bank Act, which requires federal financial regulators to publish annual reports on applications received for creating new financial institutions. These reports will help give critical insights to the current de novo chartering process and how Congress can reduce complexities and redundancies in the system. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, I believe this legislative package with my bills included is much more aligned with the goal of safe and sound financial system that works for all the American people, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, a big supporter of community banks, Ms. Garcia.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to rise against H.R. 6955. Instead of the Main Street Act, this bill, Mr. Speaker, should be called the Wall Street Wins, Main Street Loses Act. It does not help end the affordability crisis, feed hardworking Americans, or keep a roof over their heads. Instead, this bill sneaks in deregulatory measures, further weakens the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and weakens reinvestment in anti-discrimination safeguards. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit, to send this back to committee. If the House rules permit it, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to the bill. My amendment would limit the provisions of this bill from applying to any globally systematically important bank holding companies. Simply put, it ensures that the bill's deregulatory provisions do not apply to megabanks. I ask for unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment.
Objection.
I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit. Let's send back this to committee so that we can make sure that it truly works for our community banks and that it does not give Wall Street another big win. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think Mr. Loudermilk, who spoke a moment ago, the vice chairman of our subcommittee on financial institutions, made a very good point also about how this bill strengthens competition. Chairman Andy Barr of Kentucky, Ranking Member Waters of California, and Mr. Loudermilk all mentioned the importance of encouraging de novo banks, meaning startup banks, particularly in our fast-growing communities that have seen disproportionate business and population growth, like South Florida or other places across the nation. Well, all three of those members have something in common, which is they support greater de novo provisions. We had Mrs. Waters in the housing bill, and we have two in this bill that encourage startup banks, that encourage the regulators to work and have a better strategy for startup financial institutions, because that means that they can meet the growth. And what does that do, Mr. Speaker? It increases competition for the biggest companies because they are close to customers. They have a business strategy. They're unique to the marketplace. So that is another example of how this bill, in fact, is counter to the assertion that it's only geared towards Wall Street institutions. Mr. Speaker, I want to yield 2 minutes to my friend from Pennsylvania who understands finance from both the point of view of one of our biggest, most successful industrial states, Pennsylvania, having been a statewide officer, as well as a highly successful manufacturer and entrepreneur. Mr. Muser is the chair of our Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, and I yield him 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to commend our chairman, Chairman French Hill, for his excellent leadership. I do rise in support of the very appropriately named Main Street Capital Access Act, introduced by Chairman Hill and Subcommittee Chairman Barr. The legislation does exactly what it says. It supports access to capital for Main Street. At the start of this Congress, Chairman Hill said one of our committee's priorities were to make community banking great again. Since then, we have advanced the package of bills before us that is the largest community bank deregulatory reform effort since the 1990s. 20 years ago, community banks, Mr. Speaker, financed 65% of home loans in this country. Today, it is less than 30%. This bill helps reverse that trend. It lowers capital hurdles so new community banks can form and tailors bank regulations so small and mid-sized banks are regulated fairly. These changes allow banks to extend more mortgages, be more competitive with small business loans, and improve access to credit for all Americans. This is a housing bill, a small business bill, an affordability bill, and an access to capital bill. Importantly, the bill also includes legislation to codify President Trump's executive order preventing debanking, such as my bill, the Safe Guidance Act, which affirms guidance does not have the effect of law. Both guidance and reputational risk were weaponized under the previous administration to debank legitimate legal businesses. This bill corrects those wrongs. This legislation supports community banks, protects Main Street across the country, and I urge support, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time remains for each side?
The gentlewoman from California has 15 minutes. The gentleman from Arkansas has 8.5 minutes.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Speaker, members, I want to mention again one of the atrocities that I have been able to experience working on these issues. Again, Wells Fargo was fined $307 billion just a few years ago for widespread mismanagement of automobile loans and mortgages. Their actions included unlawful fees and even repossession of cars. Now, someone would say, $3.7 billion. Well, I want you to know they make so much money, that's just the cost of doing business. And they'll keep doing it if we keep allowing them to get away with what they're getting away with today, if they're trying to get away with today. If you want to guarantee that your bill, question, helps Wells Fargo, you should support Ms. Garcia's amendment, which says that mega banks can't benefit from this bill. But I guess you won't. After all, you know that today is Dodd-Frank's birthday, and you are the skunk at the party. And so there's so much that we could point out that the average citizen knows in dealing with their banks. Average citizen is tired of being treated in the way that they're treated by their banks. And I want to tell you, you're correct in the support that you did for the big bill that Mr. Hill and I worked so hard on. We have a lot in that bill, but let me point out one of the things in that bill that give you cause to be concerned. Right now, if you find a residence that you would like to buy, particularly if you're in a rural community or you may be a low-income community, but you work every day and you can afford a house for maybe $90,000 to $100,000. The bank don't want to be bothered with you. The bank wants the big loans. The bank wants the $1 million loans. They want the $500 million mortgages. They don't want the small mortgages, and guess what? They don't do them. As a matter of fact, many communities where there are residents who could afford the houses in their community are sold out to private equity firms and others who come and buy these houses pennies on the dollar. But they won't sell them to you because you don't look like a big profit maker for them. I'm so pleased I work with Mr. Hill, and we have done something to change that, to encourage the banks to pay attention to those who can afford that $90,000 house, that $100,000 house, that $150,000 house, that $200,000 house. They're working every day, they can afford it, but the banks are not interested. You tell me that we should not be concerned about deregulation that puts these banks in a position where they are not only moving toward consolidation, but they are taking over banking in ways that will help them to get richer and richer. And guess what? You'll keep paying the fines, the big banks, because that's the cost of doing business, and they still make money. This is outrageous. This is ridiculous. No more deregulation. No more looking at how you can frame it in such a way that you're saving the community banks. You're not saving the community banks. As a matter of fact, you're putting them out of business. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield 1 minute to my good friend, the gentleman from the beautiful territory of Guam, strong background in financial services, healthcare, and business and insurance. So I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
The gentleman from Guam is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 6955, the Main Street Capital Access Act. When the people of Guam set out to enterprise new business ventures, we turned to our community banks to raise capital. However, much of America's financial system is not designed with small businesses in mind. While big banks have the resources to cut through red tape, small community ventures often struggle to comply with regulatory regime that never had them in mind. The Main Street Capital Access Act makes common sense reforms, tailoring regulations so small lenders can comply, while opening more resources to the new banks, small banks, and rural banks which serve communities like Guam. This bill will give the Guam businesses community a fair chance, and I thank the Financial Services Committee for their work on this legislation. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Proponents say this bill is just for community banks. Ha ha. But here we have another example of the big banks sneaking in their rollback. I have 4 postings from the Bank Policy Institute, which represents all of the largest banks like Wells Fargo. These postings advocate for indexing regulatory thresholds to nominal GDP instead of inflation. Why? It allows more and more banks to escape regulatory scrutiny. This bill will give Trump's regulators and only Trump's regulators the chance, the opportunity to index 40 different thresholds to let large banks off the hook. Well, Wall Street is making record profits while they are helping them. And so, Mr. Speaker and members, for those of us who really care about community banks, we want to keep them because they service in a more profound way their communities. Again, I will repeat, they know and understand. When you have a problem, you can call a big bank and nobody you will find. You will go through different menus that they have, but you will not get somebody where you can walk into the bank and have somebody sit beside at that desk and you can talk to and you can point out your problem and you can get help. Do I have to say more? I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Knott.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 6955, the Main Street Capital Access Act. For the vast majority of our nation's history, community banks were the primary artery into progress for all Americans. That reality is being threatened today by sloppy and ineffective policies that originate right here in Washington, D.C. Whether it's the Dodd-Frank regulatory structure or the millions of rules and regulations that are in existence today, community banks have been choked out by these all-encompassing regulations. With administrative costs rising every year, local banks simply cannot afford to operate. We can see this most clearly in 1980, there were more than 14,000 community banks in the United States. Now, because of the regulatory structure of the current market, there are roughly 4,000 community banks. This stifles lending, it reduces competition, and it makes it harder for Americans, especially in rural communities, to access capital. Put plainly, the current regulatory climate punishes community banks and it benefits larger international banks. My home state of North Carolina has long had a proud history of vibrant community banks. And today, there are very few exceptions to this, but there are really only 2 choices for community banks in today's market if they want to survive. That's to grow large enough to be acquired or to merge with another institution. Whether it was Wachovia, First Citizens, BB&T, or even Bank of America, each of these began in North Carolina as a local community bank before growing and becoming a key player in our economy through a merge or an acquisition. It's time to restore a market that welcomes and protects community banks, a market that encourages competition, and most importantly, one that serves the American citizen. H.R. 6955 does just that. Thank you to Chairman Hill for your important work on this legislation. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this bill today. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
A wide variety of labor, consumer, and civil rights groups are strongly opposed to this bill. Let me read from one of the letters we received, quote, "The National Community Reinvestment Coalition, the NCRC, and our network of 700 community organizations urge members to oppose H.R. 6955, the Main Street Capital Access Act, and vote no on the House floor," quote, unquote. That's what we're being urged to do by our supporters. H.R. 6955 is a broad bank deregulation package that would weaken fair lending transparency, community accountability, and bank supervision and merger review, quote, unquote. The bill would reduce the tools regulators and communities rely on to detect redlining, monitor access to credit, evaluate bank mergers, event harmful consolidation, and hold financial institutions accountable to the people they serve, end quote. And the signers of the letter don't just come from blue states, but from all over the United States of America. This includes Bill Y. Company from the great state of Kansas. We also have Building Neighborhoods Together in Pennsylvania, Fair Housing Center of Northern Alabama, and Freedom Equity in Ohio. More signers include Georgia Advancing Communities Together, the Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation in Texas, and the United States Broadway Corporation in New Mexico. Now, I could go on, but there's no time for that. So I would ask the Speaker for unanimous consent to enter the letter into the record. So members have a choice today. Whose side are you on? Do you want to advance Donald Trump's deregulatory agenda to help out his wealthy friends on Wall Street? Or are you on the side of working families and labor unions and consumers and civil rights groups like those all over the country who just want equal and fair access to affordable financial products and services? For many of you who have been in this struggle with banks about all kinds of issues where you've tried to get help, I want you to, again, go to your bank where you have a problem. Don't go because, they're only available, on the phone. And state your problem and see who you can get to talk to you. See if you can get an appointment. See if you can get some answers to the questions that you have. You can't do this with these big mega banks. They don't have time for you. They don't have time to listen to you talking about you only have, $200,000 and you want to buy this house around the corner. They're not interested in that. They're interested, again, in the big money. They're interested in not only providing the loans for those who are spending, $500,000 or so on a bank that they're trying to use to get a house. It is clear the big banks are sick and tired of the way that they're being treated. They know that they have a lot of power. They know they have a lot of friends in the Congress of the United States of America, but they don't know a new day is coming. A new way is coming. People are learning more and more why they have a right to be disturbed about the way that they're being treated. And so I ask people, don't be afraid to confront those big banks. Call us. Get your legislator to help you out. That's what we're supposed to do. Sometimes they can't find us. All right. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the minority how many more speakers they have. If there aren't any, I'm prepared to close.
Gentlewoman from California.
I have no more. I'm
I'd yield
prepared to close.
to my friend from California for closing.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker and members, I have another letter that says, and I quote, "This dangerous bank deregulation package would undermine core safeguards and supervision, push risk into the shadows, and make the next publicly financed bailout more likely. Further deregulation is especially alarming at a time when financial regulatory agencies are under political attack, pursuing industry-friendly agendas and starved of the resources, and when this is effectively no oversight of financial markets." It was signed by the AFL-CIO, Americans for Financial Reform, and dozens of others. And of course, I ask unanimous consent to put this into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, we know how to support community banks and credit unions. We just did that with our landmark housing bill, and I was pleased to work with the chairman of that committee, Mr. Hill, which became law just a few days ago and included 5 Republican bills and 4 Democratic ones that were focused on supporting community banks. Now, here come Republicans to push for what they and their allies want: financial deregulation. This bill has 24 Republican provisions compared to just 2 from Democrats. In fact, I'm disappointed that my friends on the other side of the aisle are advancing provisions that even contradict our carefully crafted bipartisan agreement in the housing bill. There's a provision in this bill on de novo banks that goes beyond our bipartisan deal, allowing regulators to decide whether to make permanent reforms that really should be for Congress to decide. We struck a compromise in passing the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, and I think everyone who voted for that should honor that compromise. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, this bill is a distraction from what Congress should be focusing on: ending the affordability crisis caused by Trump's failed policies. Nothing in this bill will help consumers afford groceries or pay for gas. But you know who is not suffering during the affordability crisis? Wall Street. And this bill would loosen the guardrails on Wall Street megabanks, even as they report record profits. Even Chairwoman Fox admitted that this bill is all about deregulation and rolling back Dodd-Frank, a law she said she strongly dislikes. And Chairman Hill said they received drafting assistance from Trump's regulators and banks, but not from organizations that represent workers or consumers. Now, look, we're not stupid. We understand that Trump controls all of his so-called organizations that are independent. He tells them what to do. We get that. He's in control. He's running this country. Those people who are selected to run these so-called independent agencies are those who will do nothing but do what they're told to do. And that's all probably because the groups who represent actual people oppose this bill. That's what they're told to do. That's the leadership they have. Now is not the time to plant new seeds for the next crisis. Now is the time to juice megabanks' profit margins. And now is not the time to legitimize banks' efforts to gut the CFPB, fair lending, and other consumer products. Again, I am so proud and pleased of the work we did in a bipartisan manner. I'm so proud and pleased that we were able to negotiate through some very tough times. I'm so proud to announce that we had to give some, we took some, they gave some, and we worked it out. Now, I don't know exactly what they're being told by Trump, but I know Trump is in charge,
time has expired.
and he's charging a lot of what is going on. And so,
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
Please vote no on this bill. Support the citizens, support your constituents, not Wall Street. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire the amount of time that remains for the majority?
The gentleman has 5.5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker, and first, before I start, I want to thank the ranking member and for the committee members on her side of the aisle for their work with us on developing this bill over many, many months. Mr. Speaker, 2/3 of the bills in this package that we're voting on, Main Street Capital Access Act, are supported by members on the Democratic side of the aisle. This is a truly bipartisan package of bills. We have significant work and support from individual members on the Democratic side of the aisle in partnership with House Republicans. I also want to thank Mara Woolsey, who's the Majority Staff Director, and Jay Jang and their entire team in the majority, working with the minority staff and the minority staff to craft this package. In Congress, you can't put together the kinds of successful legislative packages that the House Financial Services Committee has done in this Congress without a very hardworking and competent staff. So I thank them on both sides of the aisle. And as I thanked Andy Barr, our Majority Subcommittee Chair, a few minutes ago, I want to also thank Dr. Bill Foster of Illinois, who serves as the ranking member on our Subcommittee of Financial Institutions. This bill is successful because of their collaboration. Mr. Speaker, I heard a lot of charges about this bill, that somehow this bill benefits Wall Street versus Main Street, and that I just couldn't disagree more. I noted that 2/3 of these bills have strong Democratic support, along with our Republicans. Secondly, there's nothing in this bill that weakens consumer compliance. The fair lending laws, the fair housing laws, the equal credit opportunity laws, all those consumer statutes are upheld in this text. They're not really affected by this text. Banks have to comply with those laws. They had to comply with those laws before Dodd-Frank, and they comply with them since Dodd-Frank. So I reject the idea that somehow we are limiting or curtailing or blocking or making ineffective consumer compliance. Secondly, it is our hometown banks, both rural banks and urban banks in our towns and cities, that benefit from this banking set of provisions. As the ranking member noted, in our housing bill that we collaborated on successfully, that we got passed and it became law on July 11th, banks had some provisions there that helped them. This is the same theme continuing in this bill. If you are a small, well-managed bank, under $6 billion, you get some relief, Mr. Speaker. If you're well-managed, have good capital, you can help schedule your exams. I was with a community banker in North Carolina this week. The bank is smaller than $500 million. And I said, how are things going? He says, it's going great, except when I have 5 exams in a row, and then the loan pipeline goes to zero, because guess what? I'm the chief loan officer in this small bank. I'm the chief compliance officer. And when my community bank is filled with bank examiners for an IT exam, a trust exam, an investment exam, a AML, anti-money laundering and bank secrecy act exam, a loan quality exam, a consumer compliance exam, I can't make loans. And so if you are well managed and have high capital, you get some relief in this bill. That's who this bill, Mr. Speaker, is named at. If you have a concern over that your exam was unfair, we return some fairness in the exam process. You can go and actually question, was my exam fair or not? Whose idea was that, Mr. Speaker? Democrat from Michigan, Don Regal, U.S. Senator, 1995. Was it ever implemented? No. But it will be implemented when this bill becomes law. So this bill is focused on more capital, more deposits, more business, more success for our community banks, which in turn helps every one of our towns in this country. Who's for it? Community Development Financial Institutions, our CDFIs, have bipartisan support. They're for this bill. Our community development officials across the nation are for this bill, as they were for the housing bill. The National Bankers Association of our National Association for African American Bankers wrote a letter for this bill. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill has overwhelming support to increase competition, help our community banks thrive and succeed, which means our towns will thrive and succeed. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I urge everyone on both sides of the aisle, support this bill. Echo Alexander Hamilton, our first Treasury Secretary, when he said, our banks in this early founding of our nation are the nurseries of our national wealth. And Mr. Speaker, today, 250 years later, long after the adoption of our government, our community banks, our credit unions, they are the nurseries of the national wealth that help our families and our businesses succeed. I urge a yes vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, third reading.
To make improvements to the federal banking laws and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Garcia of Texas moves to recommit the bill H.R. 6955 to the Committee on Financial Services.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. And those opposed, no. And in the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The motion is not for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring the vote for the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. This is a gentleman from Oklahoma. Mr. Cole, seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1438, I call up the bill H.R. 9770, the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2027, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 9770, a bill making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2027 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debated for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mr. Leo Delaro, will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, in support of H.R. 9770, the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2027. This Congress has a constitutional duty to fund the government, and if Article 1 teaches us anything, it's that governing means doing the work, not waiting for a crisis. It's a responsibility I've never viewed as optional, and one I've remained committed to honoring through regular order. Over the last year, Mr. Speaker, the House Appropriations Committee has acted to fulfill our fiscal year 2027 responsibilities. Previous partisan shutdowns and political headwinds never deterred us from doing our work. In fact, we refuse to let political dysfunction become an excuse for inaction. So line by line, bill by bill, we delivered all 12 regular appropriations bills out of committee. This was accomplished before the end of June, the earliest date on record since fiscal year 2020. We have also passed 3 of these bills across this very floor with bipartisan support. I'm deeply proud of the engagement, discipline, and focus of our cardinals and appropriators and the support of our colleagues in this chamber. While I wish I could say the same momentum and determination is being exercised on the other side of the Capitol, it is not. Senate Democrats won't even allow markups to progress. It's impossible to negotiate full-year funding when circumstances make clear that one side's willing to bring the process to a standstill before it can even leave committee. So the hard reality before us is straightforward. The fiscal year deadline is outpacing the work that remains. Our conference refuses to let the obstruction and inaction of Senate Democrats trigger another manufactured shutdown at the end of September. That's why we are acting before a funding lapse, a crisis, not in response to it. This clean, short-term continuing resolution simply keeps the government open, protects the progress we've made, and preserves the path to full-year appropriations. For anyone questioning this legislation, the facts are simple. It extends the government funding deadline to December 4th, denying any party the opportunity to manufacture leverage before elections. It contains no poison pills or partisan riders. It prevents harmful disruptions to our national security and the vital programs our constituents rely on. And it preserves the House's progress toward completing full-year fiscal year 2027 appropriations. You see, it's never too early to do the right thing. In fact, after Senate Democrats forced the 2 longest government shutdowns in American history and abandoned previously negotiated funding agreements more than once, we have every reason to act early and every responsibility to do so. The House will make clear to the nation where we stand, and it's on the side of stability, certainty, and the American people. Additionally, supporting this bill does not limit, hinder, or halt any work on the full-year appropriations or any of the 12 bills. The choice is clear. Either members will vote to keep the government working, or they will vote to risk another unnecessary shutdown. I know which option my constituents expect. I know which option gives families relying on nutrition assistance or disaster relief the certainty they need. I know which options our troops, veterans, TSA agents, and government employees deserve. I know which option I will choose. So I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this responsible measure, and I look forward to continuing the FY 2027 appropriations process in the coming months. With that, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
For those of you who may not know and have not been following this process closely, I would like to bring you up to speed on how we came to consider this piece of legislation before us today. On Friday afternoon, after everyone had gone home for the weekend, Republicans released a bill to extend government funding from September 30th through December 4th. Republicans introduced the measure with no bipartisan negotiation, little advanced notice, and without any information from the government agencies as to what funding they will actually require to continue their operations for the duration of the bill. The final Homeland Security bill that passed unopposed in April, it was bipartisan, and it was by a voice vote. And it was in that direction because it included a provision to remove all of the funding for the Border Patrol. Chair Cole's bill does not continue that agreement. That prohibition is removed by this continuing resolution, which would allow Homeland Security Secretary Mullen to transfer billions of dollars to the Border Patrol. We assumed the removal of this language was a mistake. No harm, no foul. So before the bill was introduced, we reached out to our colleagues across the aisle, informed them of the error, and shared language to fix it. But they refused to do so. Instead, they chose to introduce a bill that would allow Secretary Mullen to transfer billions more taxpayer dollars to the Border Patrol without implementing any of the protections Democrats have sought since the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good earlier this year. A clear line in the sand that Democrats have drawn for months. The American people support these protections. Protections like mandating the use of body-worn cameras, not just taking the money for them and then refusing to turn them on. Prohibiting operations at sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, and houses of worship. Requiring agents to get a warrant from a judge before kicking in someone's door. Allowing independent investigations into misconduct, ending racial profiling, and taking off the masks. The need for these protections is as urgent as ever. In recent weeks, immigration agents have shot and killed residents in Maine and in Texas, neither of whom were targets of enforcement operations. We cannot, in good conscience, allow billions of dollars to flow to these agencies without major reforms to keep our constituents safe from further violence. I want to state clearly and plainly, Democrats do not want a government shutdown. There would be no need for one. There are still 2 months before the funding deadline. There is no need to rush through an incomplete extension. We ought to take the time to gather the information we need to get it right the first time. I might add that yesterday afternoon, we received a list of the programs that has been compiled by the federal agencies, detailing the additional provisions they believe, the agencies believe, are necessary to sustain their operations through December 4th. Now, we received this late yesterday afternoon. There are over 50 programs listed by the agencies to take some action so that they can be protected during a continuing resolution. And many of these provisions, they're not included in the bill that we considered today. I asked my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, look through the list. There may be something in your community, in your district, that's very important to you, and it's not in this bill, which you are going to potentially vote for today. And among these efforts, there are changes to support wildfire suppression operations. They provide public housing agencies with funding to maintain housing assistance for tens of thousands of households, and they continue programs that provide utility assistance for rural communities. You ask people today whether or not one of the highest costs they are paying for today in an affordability crisis is the cost of utilities. And that assistance is not in this bill. It is no surprise that the measure we're considering failed to include these provisions. After all, the bill was introduced 3 days before we had this information. But that is the problem. Rushing this bill to the floor haphazardly without carefully considering the various needs that must be met is no way to govern, and it is irresponsible. This resolution was dropped on us on Friday afternoon without any bipartisan negotiation. Had we been consulted, there are several provisions we would have pushed for to strengthen the measure and to protect congressional prerogatives, including the reversal of a proposed federal rule from the Office of Management and Budget that allows political appointees in the Trump administration to unilaterally block or terminate grant funding if they deem it not sufficiently in line with the president's policy priorities. If we had taken the time to negotiate this measure, we could be here touting a bipartisan agreement with a plan to fully fund the government for the next fiscal year before the end of this Congress. Instead, we are scrambling to jam through a one-sided stopgap measure 2 days before everyone leaves for the August recess. At minimum, I cannot support this bill without the inclusion of the technical language regarding the Border Patrol that was agreed upon in April. Beyond that, the decision to pursue this path without any bipartisan negotiations gives me serious reservations moving forward. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I yield 5 minutes to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Arkansas and chairman of the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Programs. Thank you very much. And the subcommittee chair, again, of that subcommittee of the full Appropriations Committee, Mr. Warmack of Arkansas.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to my friend, Mr. Cole, for giving me this time. I rise to support H.R. 9770, the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2027, in hopes that it's not necessary. And if we were to complete our work as the framers had intended and outlined for us, we wouldn't be standing here today. This is an insurance policy. This ensures that assuming we don't finish our work by the end of September, by the end of this fiscal year, our government will be held harmless. And who could argue an insurance policy that holds the government harmless when we begin a new fiscal year? And under the leadership of Mr. Cole, the House Appropriations Committee, as you just heard, has advanced all 12 bills out of committee. So we've done our job well before the end of the fiscal year. 3 of these full-year funding bills have already cleared the floor and ready for action in the Senate. Sizable progress towards our goal of restoring regular order in this appropriations process. I'm exceedingly proud of the work my colleagues and I have done in crafting responsible bills that right-size the discretionary side of our budget, but I'm also pragmatic. I'm aware of the political realities that lie before us right now. And the very fact is we have a job to do, and time is running out on us. Too often, Mr. Speaker, we wait until the 11th hour to create some kind of a process by which we can avoid a real catastrophe, gambling with the functions of government that people depend on. H.R. 9770 is a clean solution to extend government funding until December 4th, ensuring zero disruptions to the operations of programs like SNAP, like WIC, the National Flood Insurance Program, disaster relief, and scores of other programs. Now, it's no secret I'm not a fan of CRs. No self-respecting appropriator would ever embrace a CR. My preference has always been to fulfill our Article I responsibility before the deadline, following through on the job that the American people sent us to Washington to do. Passing this CR is a much better alternative than to threaten the government shutdown at the expense of the American people. This CR does not prevent us from continuing our work on full year fiscal 27 appropriations. Instead, it provides a runway to work with our Senate counterparts and iron out a final agreement, all while preventing the abyss of uncertainty created by a lapse in appropriations. Mr. Speaker, for 43 days, a stalemate in Congress caused an unnecessary and costly government shutdown as political games took priority over our constitutional responsibility. The shutdown impacted many services and programs that our constituents count on. It crippled biomedical research, upended infrastructure projects, and it risked our national security. As chairman of the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee, I can speak directly to the impact it had on agencies within our jurisdiction. Prior to the shutdown, the FAA was already falling short of its controller staffing targets. The shutdown exacerbated that problem. Without the promise of a paycheck, many of these air traffic controllers opted to take another employment opportunity instead of doing the job that the American people needed them to do. The results were canceled or delayed flights and ground stops at airports across the nation. By the end of the shutdown, Mr. Speaker, 6 million people had been affected, not to mention the estimated cost incurred by the U.S. travel sector of $150 million a day. This is just one of many examples that happens, the catastrophic consequences of a government shutdown. And what we're doing today is offering this insurance policy to see that that doesn't happen again. So we have a binary choice today, later today, on this bill. You're either going to vote for continuing the appropriations that fund the discretionary side of government till December the 4th, or you will be in the column voting to shut the government down. I think it's a pretty simple, no-brainer kind of vote. So I encourage my colleagues, including my friend, the ranking member, Ms. DeLauro from Connecticut, vote yes on this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from Oklahoma reserve? The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized. Reserve. The gentlelady reserves. Are both prepared to close?
I advise, Speaker, I am prepared to close.
The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I might add, with all this concern about the folks who were out of work, who were waiting in long lines, about our folks at the Coast Guard and others, it was my proposal that said, let's fund those agencies. And because there's difficulty about ICE and about Border Patrol, that let's fund the agencies and move forward. It took the Republicans 79 days to decide that that was the good fix, and therefore we could pay those people. They kept them just dangling in the wind for those 79 days, all because they would like to continue to fund rogue agencies who are lawless, who are putting at risk people in our communities, and more than at risk, most recently, 2 people killed, one in Maine and one in Texas. You know, the Homeland bill passed, and I'm going to mention it again, unopposed in April. Voiced vote, because it included the provision to remove all funding for the Border Patrol. This continuing resolution doesn't continue that agreement. And as I said, we viewed that this was an error that was made. Because what this opens up is allowing Homeland Security Secretary Mullen to transfer billions of dollars to the Border Patrol. Same agency responsible for harassing and killing American citizens. Again, what we tried to do was to reach out to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in good faith, crafted the language, informed them of the error, and shared that language to fix it. They have refused to do so and continue to refuse to do so. One has to ask the question of why? Who wants to shut down a government? I certainly don't. And Democrats do not want a government shutdown. If I had my way, we'd be able to fund the government on a bipartisan basis through the appropriations process, one bill at a time. And unfortunately, it seems increasingly likely at some point a continuing resolution will be necessary, but that does not mean we must rush through an incomplete, hastily constructed, one-sided stopgap measure that fails to adequately meet the government's funding needs. Agencies only came up with their needs yesterday afternoon, over 50 of these needs. And I admonish my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, read it carefully. Read it carefully, because something that may affect your community and something you care deeply about, and seeing that agency move forward during a period of a continuing resolution may be in here, but not on what you will vote on this afternoon. I'm disappointed that the apparent error in this measure, which again allows the Secretary of Homeland Security to transfer billions of dollars in direct contravention of the agreement, has not been corrected. I would much rather be standing before you to tout a bipartisan agreement that, in fact, moves us forward through the appropriations process on a bipartisan basis. It's a partisan path that my colleagues have taken us on here, without all the information necessary to draft an adequate funding extension, and without consulting anyone else on their proposal. This is a go-it-alone approach. And you know what? That is not a way to govern, and we know that, especially those of us who sit on the Appropriations Committee. It's not a go-it-alone approach. You have to engage. You have to be involved in a negotiation, which is what we were involved in April, and we came to a conclusion. That's what we should be doing now, engaging in a negotiation, coming to a conclusion, fixing what is an error in the drafting of the language of the continuing resolution. Don't hold us up. Pass a bill that doesn't meet the needs of the American people. I urge my colleagues, strongly encourage them, to take the time. Let's get it right the first time. Let's come to the table. Let's negotiate an agreement we can all support. Let's work together to fully fund the government for fiscal year 2027. That's what we can do. There isn't any question about that in my mind, that we can do that. So all of these obstacles that you want to put forward with arguments about who wants to shut the government down, let's get real. Fix the error that was made. Fix the error that we placed in that bill and said no money for border control unless there would be the protections. There is an open door to Border Patrol, and there are no protections. I believe the American people have sent us here to do work on their behalf, to make sure that we address the issues that we care about. We can do that. And it wouldn't take very long. I don't know what the reluctance is to fix the error that would be made and set us on a path to be able to pass bipartisan bills and a continuing resolution that we can all support. It is what I am committed to doing. I encourage a no vote on this legislation in its current form. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady from Connecticut yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by complimenting my good friend, the ranking member of the Full Appropriations Committee. She has bargained with us throughout this process in good faith, and it has been a pleasure to work with her. And I've often been quoted, and I'll say it here on the House floor, you can trust Rosa DeLauro. When she gives you her word, she keeps her word. And so we have no complaint at all with our friends on the other side of the aisle in the House, and certainly not with our distinguished ranking member. I will tell you, we've not seen that same sort of good faith from the Senate of the United States, particularly Senate Democrats. Quite frankly, they came to a bill agreement last year. When we were trying to get the first 3 bills out, which we succeeded working together in doing, gosh, yeah, let's just keep working. What we want is a clean, continuing resolution and a short date. We gave them both those things, and instead they then added new demands unrelated to the subject at hand. Demands that, frankly, we did not agree with, did not accept. And what did we get? We got a 79-day full shutdown, as my friend pointed out. We don't think that's acceptable. We want to continue the process. Second, we negotiated again earlier this year. Again, we thought we had an agreement. We made concessions to our friends on the other side, concessions which we thought really weren't concessions. They were helpful suggestions from the Democrats. Let's add more training for our men and women and the ICE and Department of Homeland Security. Let's have some additional training. Let's have some additional funding. Let's do. Those were all things we agreed to, and then once again we got another shutdown. So frankly, we just want to make assurance. I have no doubt we can negotiate differences, including some of the concerns my friend raised today in the time that we have between now and September 30th. What we don't want is a government shutdown used and perverted for political purposes 5 weeks before an election. We think that is the risk that we're running in dealing with the Senate. While we've worked productively, we've gotten bills out on both a partisan and a bipartisan basis in the House. We haven't seen that in the Senate. Honestly, they haven't passed a single appropriations bill yet. They've refused to sit down and negotiate in good faith in the Senate. I would say our friends in the House have negotiated in good faith. We actually did backflips last year to give our friends in the House the measures that needed to get passed in the form that they asked to pass them. They kept their word. We passed all those bills. We did, and the Senate, frankly, we did not get that kind of response. We gave them those things. Instead, we got a shutdown that, frankly, was inexplicable. So we want to avoid that. So we've presented here today a bill that should be non-controversial. It simply extends funding through December the 4th. It does not have any poison pills in it. There's nothing in the bill that my friends object to. They want to put additional things in the bill. Fine, we can talk about that, but let's just assure that funding is going to go on no matter what. That's all this clean, continuing resolution does. Look, I've been around here long enough to know that the tensions rise as you move toward an election. And I've been around here long enough to see members on both sides of the aisle try to leverage a shutdown to extract additional concessions. We want to avoid that, and we want to continue to both move bills across this floor. Obviously, we've moved ours out of committee. We want to give the Senate time to do the same thing. Count me as skeptical that they're going to do much before the election, but we want to make sure between when we leave here on September 30th and that election, and sometime beyond that, December 4th, that the government continues to function, and we're available to negotiate at any time. And we, as my friends on the House side have done, have kept our word in those negotiations. They've been in good faith. All this does is make sure that we do not have a shutdown come September 30th, nor do we have a wild effort by either individual members or either party to demand things in exchange for keeping the government open. The government will be open until the election is over. I actually think that's a concession and a favor to everybody. It's a favor to the American people to make sure that they are not inconvenienced and endangered by the government shutdown. Now, if we have to wait until after the election, till our friends in the Senate want to sit down and work, then we'll wait till after the election. But we don't have to wait through a shutdown. We don't have to create the temptation for individual members to exploit artificial deadline of the end of the fiscal year. We just need to keep working as we have productively. That's all this bill does. There's no poison pills in it. There's no increase in funding. There's no other extraneous legislation attached to it. It's a clean, simple CR to avoid a shutdown before a scheduled election and to give us enough time after that election to sit down, either resolve our differences, which is what I hope we can do, or if we need additional time, we'll look at that then. If there's other matters along the way, we're happy to sit down and talk about those. We just want to take the possibility of a government shutdown off the table. Now, some people may think that's being cautious. Those people would probably not be aware that we went through the longest full government shutdown in American history, triggered by our friends in the United States Senate, the Democrats in the United States Senate. Some people might think that, again, we run the risk at our borders. We had to resort to extraordinary measures to continue to fund the Border Patrol. Why anybody's mad at the Border Patrol, I'll never know. All they've done is their job. We've had no known illegal entries in the United States in over a year. That's something to be proud of. So why the Border Patrol is mixed up in this, I'll never know, but I'm happy to talk to my friends about it on the other side. Let's do the prudent thing, as my friend Mr. Womack said. Let's take out an insurance policy. Let's remove the option of a government shutdown, and let's continue to work in good faith. We've done that in this House. That's why all 12 bills are out of committee. I commend my friends on the other side. They made their points. They made their arguments. They supported a couple of those bills. Others, they might not. But the point is, they worked in good faith. That's not happened in the United States Senate. We've had 2 shutdowns triggered by people that historically condemn any shutdown. Their argument has always in the past been, let's keep the government open while we negotiate. That's all this CR does. It ensures no artificial deadline and ensures we'll get the election in the rearview mirror without shutting down the government as we move into an election. So we think this is a prudent thing to do. I hope some of my friends on the other side will accept that view and vote accordingly. If not, we'll try to do this on our own, but we would prefer to do it in cooperation with our friends. And that's, again, that's all we're trying to do. So I would urge, Mr. Speaker, that my colleagues support this bill, that we make sure there is no government shutdown come the end of the fiscal year, and that we make sure we can conduct our elections in November without the threat of a shutdown leading into those elections. Then we would prudently try to resolve our differences on the other side of the election. Pretty simple stuff. Again, we're willing to talk about other matters that our friends want to bring up. We just want to take the option of a shutdown off the table. It's that simple. So I urge my colleagues to support this bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2027 and for other purposes.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut seek recognition?
I ask the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
Does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 8800.
Without objection, pursuant to House Resolution 1438 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 8800. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Moran, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 8800, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2027 for military activities of the Department of Defense, for military construction, and for defense activities of the Department of Energy, to prescribe military personnel strengths for such fiscal year and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in the first section of House Resolution 1438 and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services or their respective designees. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Throughout our committee's oversight hearings this year, we've heard a consistent theme. The defense industrial base, the foundation of our military power, is in deep trouble. Over the last 30 years, the defense industrial base has atrophied significantly. We are no longer capable of manufacturing for our warfighters at scale and speed. In the 1990s, America had 51 prime defense contractors. Today, only 6 remain. Skilled talent has left the workforce, leaving hundreds of thousands of defense manufacturing jobs unfilled. Excessive regulation pushed small businesses, startups, and private capital out of the defense business. Inconsistent demand signals discourage prime contractors from investing in production capacity. As a result, our stockpiles of critical defense articles have fallen to dangerously low levels. That includes critical minerals, which we have very little capacity to mine, refine, or process. While America allowed vital manufacturing capability to erode, China did not. China's shipbuilding capacity dwarfs ours. They are outproducing us on ships, drones, and munitions. They control over 90% of the world's critical mineral refining and processing capacity, and they have embedded themselves deep within our defense supply chains. The consequences are clear. There are growing doubts about our ability to sustain a protracted conflict against China and our other adversaries, and that's unacceptable. We must take action to address these problems before American deterrence erodes any further. The FY27 NDAA takes that action. This year's bill is focused on revitalizing the defense industrial base. We are giving industry the certainty it needs to invest, expand, and produce faster. We're cutting needless regulations that prevent innovative businesses from working with the Pentagon. We're reviving our organic industrial base by improving conditions at our depots, arsenals, and shipyards. We're securing our supply chain by giving the department authorities to better identify vulnerabilities and then replace them with domestic or allied sources. And we're creating new jobs and helping Americans build advanced technical skills. In addition to revitalizing the defense industrial base, the NDAA meets our other crucial needs. We are raising pay for service members and improving housing, education, and child care for military families. We're strengthening our nuclear deterrence and missile defense while maintaining a strong posture to deter our adversaries. And we're prioritizing the development of innovative technologies that will give our warfighters the edge in future conflicts. To support these policies, we're authorizing $1.15 trillion in discretionary funds to match President Trump's historic budget request. For the first time in 40 years, we've been presented a budget that accounts for the true cost of American deterrence. This top line begins to reverse the damage caused by decades of underinvestment in the U.S. military. But we understand that with this historic investment comes an even more urgent need to guard against waste, fraud, and abuse. The bill does so by cutting nearly $30 billion in wasteful spending, reducing fraudulent payments, and providing new authorities to ensure the Pentagon achieves a full, clean audit within 24 months. Peace through strength doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins in our factories, our depots, and our shipyards. This bill reflects our commitment to rebuild that foundation. It will build the ready, capable, and lethal fighting force we need to deter China and other adversaries. I urge all my colleagues to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Alabama reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
First of all, I want to thank Chairman Rogers for the process that he put together on this bill. In committee, I think we had a very fair and open process, certainly the way the bill was put together originally. Chairman did a lot of work in the last couple of years on acquisition reform. We did that in a bipartisan way. It's reflected in the substance that was in the bill. And then we had a very good debate. A lot of amendments were offered, and I think it was handled in a very bipartisan way. So the product has a lot of good aspects to it, and the chairman mentioned most of them. The continuation down the road of acquisition reform, which can best be summed up as we need to innovate faster at scale. And the chairman did a great job of describing why that's so important, the progress we've made, and why this committee has played such a crucial role in helping to make that happen. And I think we should be proud of that. I think the bill also reflects support for the troops, as the chairman mentioned. Pay raise, but more than that, just generally making sure that they have the support, they and their families have the support they need. This builds off of the quality of life work task force that we had 2 years ago to continue to show strong support for our troops. And yes, crucially, the oversight component. We are really focused on trying to get the Pentagon to the place where they can pass an audit, where we can be more confident that the money that they are spending is being effectively spent. And I think this bill reflects that. We also, Chairman didn't mention this, but we've had a lot of frustrations with this particular Pentagon in terms of them not providing information in a timely manner to us or to the American public. We have a number of provisions in this bill that require that or fence funding for aspects of the Pentagon to get them there. I will say also a couple of Democratic amendments did pass in the process. We got collective bargaining for all defense employees back in, a bipartisan vote. We also changed back to the base names that the commission put in place, which I think is a very positive step. So there are a lot of good things about this bill and certainly about the process as it came out of committee. There's just 3 problems from a Democratic perspective. First of all, the rule is incredibly partisan. There are a number of issues on the size of the budget, a number of oversight issues, concerns we have about the war in Iran. None of those amendments were ruled in order. And I just don't think that's the way this process should work. They should be ruled in order. If they want to vote them down, vote them down. But to have completely blocked any of those Democratic amendments, of the amendments that are up for debate, I believe that only one is a Democratic amendment. Now, there's a lot of mutually agreed upon stuff that's on block, but on the truly controversially important amendments, they don't give us a chance to even have the debate. And those debates are incredibly important because there are a lot of concerns we have, not so much with this bill as with the Department of Defense as it is currently being run. And as the president is currently exercising national security and defense policy in this country. And I will mention just 2. Number 1, the war in Iran. We're all sort of, I guess, in collective denial about what an utter disaster this has been and how it is getting worse every day. We lost 4 more service members over the weekend. This after we have been told over and over and over again that Iran is completely obliterated. They have no military capacity whatsoever. And yet they're still launching missiles, they're still launching drones, they're still wounding and killing American service members and threatening the shipping throughout the Strait of Hormuz. The degree to which the president is not living in reality on the war in Iran is unbelievably alarming. Why do we let this continue? Why does not the Republican Party speaker say, yes, it would be great if we could drop a certain number of bombs on Iran and they'd quit and they'd give up and they'd abandon their nuclear program, they'd abandon their support for terrorism, they would get rid of their ballistic missile program, they would open up the Strait of Hormuz. There is no plan to make that happen. And yet the president keeps going forward, keeps dropping more bombs, deplenishing our stockpile, placing us at greater risk and creating greater global chaos. And whatever else may be said about the NDAA, there's a lot of positive aspects to it. It will continue to support the Department of Defense that the president is using to wage this war, this incredibly disastrous, terrible decision of a war. And that makes it very difficult to support this. We need to get peace now, and that would help. Second, the amount of money. You add it up, this is $1.15 billion. They want $350 billion for a reconciliation package, and they want another $90 billion in an in a supplemental package. That puts them at $1.6 trillion. Could we effectively spend $1.6 trillion in the Department of Defense? Maybe. I question whether or not they could spend that much money that quickly, that effectively, but sure. There's a lot of more missiles we could buy. There's drones we could buy. There's ships we could buy. There's planes we could buy. We have a $40 trillion debt. We're making cuts in Medicaid and other health care programs in order to fund this $1.6 trillion. And even then, we're still driving up the debt because we insist on doing $4 trillion in tax cuts. The math just doesn't add up. We cannot support a defense budget of that size when we know that it is making it more likely that we're going to struggle to fund crucial domestic programs in healthcare, in infrastructure, in energy, in all kinds of areas that are an incredible priority. So the dollar figure is simply too high. And I will close by, this is a plea that always falls on deaf ears, but I will try. You can't vote to increase the debt by $4 trillion and then a couple months later, vote for a balanced budget amendment. I mean, we're not living in reality around here. Make a decision, all right? Either the debt's fine, you don't worry about it, or you want to balance it. You can't vote to increase the debt and then say, oh my gosh, we need a balanced budget amendment. So the lack of fiscal reality, I think, is one of the two biggest problems with this bill. The other one, of course, being the continued support for the war in Iran that is implicitly included in it. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Tactical Air Land Subcommittee, Mr. Whitman of Virginia.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support today of H.R. 8800, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027. I'd first like to acknowledge and thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their leadership in putting together this critical piece of legislation. I also thank my friend and subcommittee ranking member Don Norcross for his partnership in leading the subcommittee on tactical air and land forces. Also, I'd like to thank our tactical air and land professional staff, Michael Curlin, Heath Bowe, Caroline Curley, Brooke Allred, Amelia Latinsky, Jay Valerio, and Andrew Smith. The FY27 NDAA takes several steps to ensure that our service members operate with unmatched capabilities to deter and defeat our adversaries. This bill allows the Secretary of War to enter into multi-year procurement contracts for both the F-15EX and F-35 aircraft. H.R. 8800 prioritizes helicopter and rotorcraft procurement, authorizing the purchase of additional Chinook, Black Hawk, and Gray Wolf helicopters. It also fully funds the future long-range assault aircraft program to continue development of the MB-75 Cheyenne. Our forces must excel in both offensive and counter-small UAS mission sets. This bill also assists the Department in achieving this by standardizing SUAS operating systems, establishing SUAS test ranges to inform and accelerate drone innovation. To counter such systems, the bill strengthens the definition of counter-UAS systems and applies standards for networked, autonomous, kinetic capabilities for SUAS defense. This NDAA also emphasizes the importance of our munitions supply. It directs the Army to expand and upgrade facilities used to manufacture 155mm artillery rounds and advances the integration of novel energetics into weapon systems. Lastly, the bill leans into innovation by expediting the development and procurement of non-traditional intermediate-range fires capabilities. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely strong bill that sends a signal to our service members that we have their back.
The gentleman's time
I
has
urge this
expired.
bill's passage, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman from Alabama reserve? Reserve. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As ranking member of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, I recognize myself for 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Mr. Chair, I rise to endorse many provisions of the Sea Power and Projection Forces mark of the 2027 NDAA, which our subcommittee crafted under the able leadership of my good friend, Chairman Trent Kelly. A whole range of much-needed Navy warships and auxiliary platforms are authorized in this bill using multi-year contracting, which will save money for the taxpayer and provide certainty to our shipbuilding industrial base to invest and grow. The bill authorizes $15 billion for the Pentagon's #1 acquisition priority, the Columbia-class ballistic submarine program. It also provides $12.5 billion for Virginia-class attack submarines and full funding for shipyard wage improvements and workforce pipelines that are vital to hiring and retention. Adding more Virginia subs will grow our undersea fleet and keep our commitment to Pillar 1 of the AUKUS security agreement to sell 3 in-service subs to the Australian Navy in the 2030s. Multi-year contracts for destroyers and oilers are also included, as well as investments in missiles and hypersonics from unmanned surface vessels. Ukraine has demonstrated how effective unmanned systems are in their defense against Russia's Black Sea invasion, and we must embrace that trend and expand our unmanned capabilities. There are areas of disagreement in this bill, particularly its approval of the administration's requests for $1 billion for obsolete battleships without a detailed design. I would note last month, the Senate Armed Services Committee wisely voted to reject this wasteful request. That money should instead be spent for the Marine Corps' request for new landing ships, which is missing from both this bill and the new reconciliation bill. Mr. Chair, the NDAA has passed for 65 consecutive years because of disciplined avoidance of irrelevant, hyper-partisan amendments. Unfortunately, the NDAA rule passed earlier today, merging the NDAA with a completely non-germane voter suppression bill, the SAVE Act, violates that long tradition. If Republican leadership is serious about passing a 66th NDAA with bipartisan support, the SAVE Act merger should be stripped from the bill or later in conference. I look forward to achieving that outcome, if not today, then later in the NDAA negotiations with the Senate. And with that, I reserve.
The gentleman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, Dr. Desjardins of Tennessee.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. I rise today in favor of the fiscal year 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. As the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, I was proud to work in a bipartisan fashion along with my friend and ranking member Seth Moulton on some of the most consequential issues to our national security. This legislation authorizes full funding to keep modernizing the nation's nuclear forces, as well as the Department of Energy's scientific and production capabilities upon which our deterrent depends. It also improves acquisition flexibility for the nuclear enterprise and refocuses statutory requirements related to plutonium pit production on the long-term need for the deterrent. We authorize significant increases for many programs that support the Golden Dome Initiative and border missile defense efforts, including space-based sensing, development of the next generation interceptor, and procurement of Standard Missile-3 interceptors. In space, we require a single official to lead the vital positioning, navigation, and timing enterprise and eliminate the current PNT bureaucracy. We also streamline redundant space acquisition organizations to build on the progress made last year to reform acquisitions. Perhaps most importantly, this bill authorizes a historic increase in the Space Force's budget. This will allow them to bring online the next generation of systems necessary to fight and win in space and support new missions to address emerging threats. This bill prioritizes the industrial base, expands U.S. defense production capacity, and supports the President's request to raise all service members' pay. It rebuilds depleted munition stockpiles through new authorities and saves taxpayers over $30 billion by cutting inefficient programs and government bureaucracy. I encourage all of my colleagues to vote in support of this legislation, and I yield back the remainder of my time to Chairman Rogers.
And I reserve.
The gentleman from Alabama reserves. The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Readiness, Mr. Garamendi of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to honor those members of the military that lost their lives recently in the Iran conflict. I also want to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their leadership. Chairman Bergman, it's been a pleasure working with you. You're a great partner. And I want to thank the Readiness Subcommittee, both on the majority and minority side. I'm proud of what we're able to accomplish this year, authorizing over $2 billion for new barracks and dormitories and other critical infrastructure projects. The bill includes positive provisions, including service member pay raises, protections for civilian workers, right to repair authorities, and transparency on military operations in the Middle East. But good provisions do not cure the larger problems this bill faces. I voted against this bill in committee and will on the floor. This bill cannot continue to increase military spending while the administration unilaterally misuses our armed forces at home and abroad as they attempt to fight immigration and, of course, Iran. This bill also authorized more than $1.5 trillion, plus another $300 billion in a reconciliation bill, which apparently will be with us soon. $1.5 trillion, plus another $80 or $90 billion to pay for the Iran war. This is an outrageous and dangerously irresponsible amount of spending. Increasing the budget is not a strategy. Without discipline and oversight, it rewards programs that are over budget, behind schedule, and failing to deliver. And how is all this paid for? Cuts for health care. Medicaid is eviscerated in the upcoming months ahead. Children food programs, in schools and out, not there. They'll go hungry. Several $100 billion in health care, gone. And it goes on and on and on. And by the way,
the gentleman's
if you're a
time has
deficit
expired.
hawk, this could not possibly be in your interest.
The gentleman's time has expired.
15 seconds.
The gentleman has 15 more seconds.
And I haven't even gotten to my favorite issue, the Sentinel and the programs of our nuclear arsenal. Again, why? We don't need the Sentinel. We don't need to spend billions on it. We can get along quite well with the existing Minuteman. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from Connecticut reserve?
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, the chairman of the Sea Power and Projections Forces Subcommittee, Mr. Kelly.
The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by commending the chairman for his leadership over the committee for the last 6 years. I'm excited to highlight a few of the many wins for the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee in this year's bill. The committee reported product authorized the procurement of the 4th Columbia-class submarine, 2 Virginia-class submarines, 2 guided missile destroyers, and 2 amphibious warships. Combined with incremental funding authority for long lead time components for the Virginia-class program, multi-year procurement authority for destroyers, and multi-ship procurement authority for future amphibious warships, we're supporting responsible investments in the future of our surface fleet and in the continued growth of our subsea advantages. At the same time, we are growing our asymmetric capabilities, investing in transformational and innovative unmanned systems like the MQ-25 carrier-launched unmanned aircraft and unmanned surface vehicles to complement our traditional platforms in a lethal high-low mix. This bill also contains parts of the SHIPS Act, which will help us down the path to a rejuvenated maritime industrial base. We are also reinforcing our commitment to our force projection and airborne combat capabilities with procurement of intra-theater airlift, 12 P-8 maritime patrol aircraft, 6 E-2Ds, Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft, a new strategic sea lift vehicle, a bulk fuel vehicle. We also provide authorities for cost savings and consistent demand signal to the industry for a multi-year procurement of E-2D aircraft as well. The challenges of our global security environment are only growing more complex, but what cannot change is our ability to project American power. The technology and platforms may change with the moment, but the end goal remains the same: peace through strength. This is a strong bill that makes essential steps towards delivering on the promise now and for the years to come. I urge all members to vote yes. I would like to thank my ranking member, Joe Courtney, and the staff, Kyle Knowles, Kelly Goggins, Janine Womble, Abby Snyder, and my personal staff, Samaj Red, Shields Armstrong, and our fellow Mark Mundy. I thank the gentleman for allowing me to speak in favor of the FY27 NDA, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Alabama reserves. The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, Mr. Norcross of New Jersey.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Ranking Member Smith and Chairman Rogers to craft this bill. Mr. Chairman, this bill continues the Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee proud bipartisan tradition and reinforcing our shared responsibility for managing strategic risk. In particular, thanks to Chairman Whitman and our subcommittee staff for building this strong bipartisan bill. I am, however, disappointed some in the majority would kill this bipartisan hard work that we've done on this bill. Our service members and their families deserve better. Mr. Chairman, this bill authorizes funding levels for key defense programs, including $4.3 billion for a helicopter procurement, $3.3 billion for the F-35 program, over $3.9 billion for ground combat vehicles, and over $4.9 billion for key weapon system procurement. Mr. Chairman, this bill also addresses the risk, the cost of military modernization without sacrificing oversight, such as authorizing multi-year procurement for the F-15EX and the F-35 aircraft, conditional on procuring sufficient spares for each aircraft, requiring the Air Force to budget for procurement a sufficient number of E-7 aircraft, authorizing multi-year procurement for key munitions, coupled with strong funding for the munitions industrial base. Mr. Chairman, this bill also includes legislation that fortifies the Office of the Director of Operational Testing and Evaluation. I remain great concern with this administration's plan for the DOT&E. We must ensure this office remains independent and relevant. And finally, I'd like to thank our subcommittee personal staff, including Jay Valerio, Mike Curlin, Heath Bope, Carolyn Carley, Brooke Allred, and certainly my personal staff, Sam DeVito, Nadia Khan, and our defense fellow, Captain John Dessier. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Nebraska, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Cyber Information Technologies and Innovation, Mr. Bacon.
The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 8800, the National Defense Authorization Act, for fiscal year 2027. I'd like to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their leadership in compiling this bill. And by the way, it passed with a huge bipartisan majority in committee. I'd also like to thank my friend and subcommittee ranking member, Mr. Rokana, for his collaboration this year. And I appreciate the great subcommittee staff who do such a fantastic job. As we've seen across modern battlefields, technology is evolving at a faster rate than ever before. Artificial intelligence, cyber, quantum, biotechnology, and other emerging capabilities are changing the way wars are fought and won. The United States is the gold standard for scientific innovation, and it is of the utmost importance that we remain committed to equipping our service members with the most up-to-date, state-of-the-art, and mission-relevant tools available. This year's NDA delivers on that promise by supporting our defense, industrial base, our science and technology communities, and our warfighters. The FY27 NDA helps lay the foundation for our future technological edge by providing budget certification authority for the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering to enable better oversight in the military services, S&T, budgets, and priorities. This bill also requires the Department to review, update, and modernize its policies on leveraging AI for military functions, ensuring more secure and robust development of AI capabilities. The FY27 NDAA also helps tackle the valley of death by requiring more formal integration and technology transition between the Defense Innovation Unit and military services. Finally, this defense bill importantly restores our defense spending to 4.5% of the GDP, which is critical to deter conflict and reinforce America's commitment to ensuring security and stability around the world. This NDA is a strong, bipartisan bill that takes care of our service members and promotes U.S. military dominance. I urge all my colleagues to support, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Alabama reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on Military Personnel, Ms. Houlihan of Pennsylvania.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Mr. Smith and Mr. Speaker. Today I have the opportunity to speak briefly with regards to the fiscal year NDAA, to fiscal year 27 NDAA. The bipartisan bill that passed out of committee includes many quality of life provisions and priorities for our service members and their families. These issues have an immeasurable impact on our recruitment and our retention efforts as well as on readiness. The bill includes a targeted pay raise in which junior service members would get higher pay increases. And these improvements to service members' paychecks should provide welcome relief to military families who are still struggling with ever-increasing gas and food prices caused by the ill-conceived and poorly executed tariffs and the current war with Iran. H.R. 8800 also addresses the growing concerns about medical readiness and access to health care by reversing efforts by the Department to limit the scope of services available at military treatment facilities. We need to make sure that military treatment facilities and military health system can deliver a force that is medically ready to deploy at a moment's notice. And just as importantly, we must be sure that the medical providers themselves have the requisite skills to address whatever injuries might come their way. The bill expands ongoing efforts to improve access to safe and quality child care by including au pairs in the Child Care in Your Home pilot program and establishing a student internship program to improve recruitment and staffing of military child development centers. And it provides a process by which military families, excluding a permanent change of station, will receive timely and relevant relocation assistance and available child care and food access services in advance of that military duty station move. And finally, the bill requires the Department to issue regulations banning the Department of Defense personnel from insider trading on prediction markets, a necessary and crucial step in safeguarding our national security. We brought this bill to the floor in a bipartisan fashion, and I urge my colleagues to reject poison pill riders that will destabilize this important work and not insert bipartisan politics over the well-being of our service members. This NDAA, like many previous defense bills, should continue to be bipartisan. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, Mr. Bergman.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the chairman for yielding. Each of us swore an oath to support and defend the U.S. Constitution. It is the basis for which we serve. Within our Constitution is the enumerated responsibility of Congress to raise an army and maintain a navy. Our committee fulfilled our constitutional duty when we reported the National Defense Authorization Act to the floor today. As our chairman indicated, we are delivering on President Trump's request to authorize the first of 2 defense appropriations, including this authorization of $1.15 trillion. While there is much to be made about the generational investments in ships and aviation, this bill also fully supports the sustainment of the defense enterprise. It strengthens our nation's commitments to our service members and their families, and it delivers major quality of life initiatives, including significant funding for facilities. Now, it is easy for some members to reject this bill because it provides too much money for our national security. Theirs is a false hope that a chaotic and irreverent global disorder will never reach the shores of our magnificent nation. I reject this premise. I believe we are already in a strategic race for the continued rise and stability of our nation. This defense budget sits as the cornerstone of this great enterprise. We need to fulfill our constitutional responsibility, and we need it now. I want to thank my Readiness Subcommittee ranking member, Mr. John Garamendi, and our personnel and professional staff that serve our Readiness Subcommittee. We are united in purpose in making our Department of War a presence to be respected in both peace and, if necessary, prevail in conflict. I commend Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for delivering this magnificent defense bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
We don't have any further speakers at this point, so we will reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Intelligence and Special Operations, Dr. Jackson.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 8800, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027. I would like to begin by thanking Chairman Rogers for his leadership in bringing the NDAA to the fore for the 60th consecutive year. As Chairman of the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee, I'm especially proud that this bill provides our Special Operations Forces, the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, and the Security Cooperation Enterprise with the tools and resources needed to execute the Department's national defense strategy and counter an ever-changing threat landscape. Crucially, this bill provides an approximate $1.3 billion increase in funding for U.S. Special Operations Command to address critical needs within its programs. The bill also invests in a wide range of intelligence capabilities and disciplines, including my provision to develop a periodic ISR strategy to make better threat-informed decisions. We continue to ask more of our Special Operations Forces, uniform and civilian intelligence personnel and security cooperation personnel, and this year's NDAA ensures that they are equipped with the capabilities necessary to maintain their operational edge over any adversary. I would also like to highlight that this bill advances critical reforms to revitalize our defense industrial base, restore lethality, and deliver on President Trump's peace through strength agenda. I was proud to lead efforts to support test and training space for unmanned aerial systems, incorporate foreign military sales demand into domestic industrial base assessments, and to officially restore the name of the Department of War. Finally, I want to recognize the tremendous work of the professional staff from the ISO subcommittee and my personal office in developing this bill. And I would also like to thank Ranking Member Jason Crow for his hard work in this endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8800, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Oh, we continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Military Personnel.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your dedication. You're a great American, truly, and it's been an honor to serve under Chairman Rogers. I'd also like to thank Ranking Member Smith for their good faith efforts to do everything they can to protect our country, and they truly are a credit. We want to thank them from the bottom of our hearts. The fiscal year 2027 NDAA contains substantial wins for service members and their families and continues the committee's tradition of improving the quality of life of service members and their families by authorizing a substantial pay raise, expanding child care, and reauthorizing special pays and bonuses, a significant overhaul of the military health system, and multiple military justice reforms. The bill also expands access to health care, increases dental coverage for our children and members of the Guard and Reserve, prevents the elimination of uniformed doctors, and increases access to specialty care. Additionally, this bill invests in our defense industrial base by completely restructuring the pay and personnel policies for our wage-grade employees in order to increase wages and reward our hardest workers with quicker promotions and more substantial bonuses. The FY27 NDAA includes essential reforms that we all know are critical to refocus our military on warfighting and lethality by requiring all personnel actions to be based on individual merit and demonstrated performance rather than race, ethnicity, or sex, or preventing weaponization of administrative investigations. Mr. Chairman, I strongly urge the passage of the FY27 NDAA so we can deliver on our promises to our service members and their families. I'd like to personally thank, from our personal office, Andrew Bond and James Nuxil, and also our professional staff here, Dave Giacchetti, Hannah Kaufman, Ali Evers, Ellie Bender, Anna Reed, and from the minority staff, Ilka Regino and Michaela Reardon. They've all been really great to work with, and I think we had a wonderful year. And I also want to thank, again, the leadership from the chairman and the ranking member, and I yield.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington is
We
recognized.
continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'd like to yield 1 minute to my friend and colleague from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to support the National Defense Authorization Act. We all appreciate Chairman Mike Rogers for his leadership and commitment for our men and women in uniform and for promoting peace through strength. We're in a conflict we did not choose between dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. This National Defense Authorization Act prepares America for emerging threats from our adversaries who, working together, seek to destroy our hard-won freedom. This bill makes clear that we stand with our allies against murderous invasion. America is engaged in worldwide competition. There is inclusion of robust authorization for nuclear modernization, emerging technologies, information operations, and industrial capacity advancements. President Donald Trump has made it clear we will defend American families with our allies, give our warriors the tools they need to win. Israel research has been vital for missile defense, and Ukraine is leading on drones and robotics. The late Sergeant Thomas Kaufman of Lexington, South Carolina, American hero, is correct. Freedom is not free. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I yield back my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Virginia, Ms. Kiggins.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the fiscal year 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. As a Navy veteran, former helicopter pilot, Navy spouse, and Navy mom, I know our military is only as strong as the men and women who serve. This bill puts our warfighters first by supporting a pay raise of up to 7% and providing them with the training, equipment, and resources they need to fight, win, and return home safely. It strengthens American air power, rebuilds our munitions stockpiles, advances unmanned and next-generation technologies, and invests in ships the Navy needs. It also supports American shipbuilders, ship repair professionals, aviators, and maintainers who keep our fleet at sea and our aircraft in the sky. I'm proud that my provisions will accelerate the development of American-made unmanned surface vessels, bring greater transparency to TRICARE, fight to protect pharmacy choice, expand access to child care, and improve military nursing staff shortages. This bill delivers peace through strength for our military, for our families, and for Virginia's 2nd Congressional District in Hampton Roads. I urge its passage, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to an outstanding member of the Armed Services Committee, the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the FY27 National Defense Authorization Act. Guam is on the front line of America's national security in the Pacific. This bill delivers nearly $1.9 billion in vital defense investments on the island while ensuring the people of Guam remain a priority. This legislation secures an extension to the H-2B workforce provision through 2035 to guarantee long-term stability for our local economy. It sets a target for military commissaries to source at least 15% of produce from local farmers, expanded workforce credentialing for our students, and protected local land by removing a proposed military acquisition of over 100 acres. Guam has carried a tremendous share of our nation's defense responsibilities for generations. As the people of Guam continue to serve this country, the passage of this NDAA will in turn serve our island. I urge our colleagues to support the passage of this bipartisan bill. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to recognize another outstanding member of the Armed Services Committee, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mills.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Likewise, you're an amazing chairman. We appreciate everything that you've done for the National Defense Authorization Act, but also for our warfighters. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of my amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act. Right now, our nation's defense industrial base is facing a massive supply chain crisis. We need to innovate, be agile, resilient, and we need to win. And the answer is right here in our small businesses, especially our employee-owned small businesses, also known as ESOPs. In 2021, the Department of Defense created a pilot program to incentivize contracting with high-performing worker-owned companies. It was a great idea, but under the current rules, a business must be 100% employee-owned to qualify. Mr. Speaker, that rigid rule locks out nearly 6,500 ESOPs nationwide, covering 14 to 15 million American workers. It makes the program completely unusable for the vast majority of ESOPs in a place in every district represented in this chamber. My amendment fixes this by aligning the ESOP threshold with the Small Business Administration rules and giving the Department of War discretion to rate these companies on merit and not formula. Data shows that employee-owned companies consistently perform better, stay resilient, and deliver higher value. By lowering this arbitrary barrier, we support these businesses while we boost competition in the DOW procurement, support American workers, and drive federal dollars back to the main street. Let's empower our small businesses, strengthen our national security, and pass this amendment. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to recognize an outstanding freshman member of the Armed Services Committee, a gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire. Did he not show up? I would amend that. I would like to recognize a former member of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Strong of Alabama, for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to this amendment. This amendment would compromise the intent of the program. Congress created and strengthened a pilot program to incentivize the Department of Defense to contract with businesses that are wholly owned by their employees. This wasn't a partisan idea. It was championed by members from across the political spectrum because it works for the department and for the workforce. My district is home to companies that have flourished under full employee ownership, and their success underscores exactly why this program was designed the way it was. Yes, this amendment would extend that benefit to partially owned firms where a single owner or a small group retains control. The benefit shifts away from the employees this program was designed to reward and undermines the very purpose of the pilot program. For this reason, I respectfully oppose the amendment. I yield back.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to recognize a freshman member of the Armed Services Committee, gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire, for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, for your leadership. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this historic National Defense Authorization Act. In the Navy, we used to say, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. For decades, our defense industrial base was allowed to decay, but thanks to President Trump, our Secretary of War, and this Armed Services Committee, we're finally turning the ship around. This bill supercharges our industrial base and builds on last year's acquisition reforms. For Virginia's 5th District, this bill unleashes local expertise in munitions manufacturing and next-generation nuclear power. We wouldn't have a country without our men and women in uniform. We owe them the best we've got. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, and I reserve, and I am prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself the balance of our time. I just, again, want to thank the chairman for the process that we went through here. I've made the arguments, don't want to restate them and belabor them, but we are deeply concerned about the ongoing war in Iran, no plan, no direction, continually rising costs, and we are also concerned about the amount of money that's being poured into defense at the same time that we are seeing cuts in Medicaid, cuts in food stamps, cuts in a variety of programs that are enormously important, and tax cuts that continue as the deficit and the debt get ever higher. So with that, I will yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to take a minute to thank my friend, the ranking member, Smith, for his tremendous partnership in fashioning this this piece of bipartisan work that's so important for our nation. He's been a great partner, and I do want everybody to know that. This is a very important bill. It provides critical authorities for our warfighters to keep us free and safe. I urge all members to support it, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Armed Services printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 11933 shall be considered as adopted. The bill, as amended, shall be considered as the original bill for purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. Amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of House Resolution 1438 and pro forma amendments described in Section 4 of that resolution. Each further amendment printed in Part A of House Report 119-755 may be offered only in the order printed in the report by the member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and the opponent, shall not be subjected to amendment except as provided in Section 4 of House Resolution 1438, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It shall be in order at any time for the chair of the Committee on Armed Services or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in Part A of House Report 119-755, not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 40 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member or ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services or their designees. Shall not be subject to amendment except as provided by Section 4 of House Resolution 1438, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. During consideration of H.R. 8800 for amendment, the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services or their respective designees may offer up to 10 pro forma amendments, each at any point for the purpose of debate. It is now in order to consider amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer amendment number 1 as the designee for Mr. Roy.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of amendment number 1307. This amendment strikes section 1213 of the bill, which would delay the deadline for the Afghanistan War Commission's final report. Instead, it maintains the reporting deadline already established in current law. The American people, our veterans, Gold Star families, and all who served in Afghanistan deserve timely answers. Congress created this commission to examine 2 decades of war, learn from our successes and failures, and ensure those lessons are not forgotten. Delaying that work only postpones the accountability and transparency that the commission was created to provide. This amendment does not change the Commission's mission. It does not alter its responsibilities. It simply ensures that the work Congress has already directed is completed on the timeline we originally required. We owe it to those who served, those who sacrificed, and the American people to keep this important effort on track. I urge my colleagues to support amendment number 1307. Mr. Chairman, with that, I reserve.
Woman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
I claim time in opposition to the amendment led by Ms. Boebert.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. I understand my colleagues' eagerness to conclude the Afghanistan War Commission's work and to have a full accounting of our nation's longest war. A war that spanned 20 years, trillions of dollars, millions of combat tours, thousands of American lives lost, tens of thousands of American lives and families forever altered.
But I do not want a half measure. I do not want an accounting that is not full and complete. When this body, when this Congress and the Armed Services Committee created the Afghanistan War Commission years ago, on a bipartisan basis, we structured this to be a full and complete accounting. Both sides appointed their members. We have a Republican co-chair, a Democratic co-chair. The work of this commission has been impressive so far. Over 350 interviews, tens of thousands of documents reviewed, field hearings across this nation. But the work is not yet complete. Both the Republicans on the commission and the Democrats on the commission say as much. They need another year to make sure that it presents a clear picture of the things we did right, the things we did wrong, so that we are not condemned to repeat the same mistakes in the past, as the saying goes. So yes, I want a timely result. But the thousands of Americans who gave their lives, the tens of thousands who stepped up to serve, deserve a full and complete accounting of what happened and ultimately what went wrong. So I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment and make sure that we have the time necessary to have the complete story so that we can fix it, we can do it better, and we can ensure that this never happens again. So I implore my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As was stated, this war was 2 decades. I don't believe the Commission needs 2 decades to complete its work. I urge support of my colleagues for this amendment, and I yield.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congress established the Afghanistan War Commission to provide the American people with accountability and transparency after 20 years of war that claimed nearly 2,500 American service members. The Commission has interviewed hundreds of senior leaders across 4 administrations and reviewed thousands of sensitive records. While the Commission has completed a first draft of its report, government shutdowns and delays in accessing certain agency records have made a 1-year extension necessary. I share the desire for accountability, but we don't get it if the Commission is forced to turn in an incomplete product. This extension will ensure the Commission's work is complete and accurate. I urge all members to oppose the amendment respectfully.
The gentleman has the only time remaining.
Sorry again, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the only time remaining.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is prepared to close. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the commission of this, or the work of this commission, pardon me, has been incredible. We're not asking for 20 years. We're not asking for 2 years. We're asking for a 1-year extension so that the Republicans and the Democrats who have dedicated their time to a full and thorough accounting of our nation's longest war can do so on a professional and bipartisan basis. And you've heard from the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, whose leadership helped establish this commission as well. We need to do this right. The men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice and their families deserve all of the answers and all of the accountability. And the additional 1-year extension is necessary to complete that. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Amen.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer Amendment Number 2 as the designee for Mr. Roy.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report Number 119-755, offered by Ms. Bober of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of Amendment Number 1304. America's military service academies have a clear important mission to educate, train, and prepare the next generation of officers who will lead our armed forces. Admission to these institutions is highly competitive, and every available appointment represents a significant investment by the American taxpayer. This amendment ensures that those limited opportunities are reserved for American citizens who are preparing to serve our country in uniform. Our first responsibility must be to young Americans who are willing to swear an oath to the Constitution and commit themselves to the defense of this nation. Our service academies should remain focused on producing American military leaders for the American Armed Forces. I urge my colleagues to support Amendment 1304. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to claim time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. I rise in opposition to this amendment. This amendment would indeed eliminate one of the most successful and the very least expensive national security investments the United States has ever made. Since as far back as 1863, our service academies have welcomed a small number of exceptional international cadets and midshipmen to study alongside America's future military leaders, and the results have been extraordinary. Those students return home to become generals, chiefs of defense, ambassadors, and senior government officials in their own lands. They leave with lifelong relationships with the Americans that they trained with alongside, and a firsthand understanding of the American military professionalism, civilian control of the military, and in moments of crisis, nations do not simply rely on treaties. They rely on trust. And trust is built between people long before it is tested between governments. And this program indeed builds that trust. And it does so for roughly 60 students per service academy each year. This isn't charity, it is strategy. We educate the future military leaders from allied nations, and we also send our own cadets and midshipmen overseas to study as well. Both sides built on trust, both sides better officers. America is safer because of it. Show me another defense investment that creates future allies, strengthens military-to-military relationships around the world, and expands American influence for the cost of educating a couple hundred students. You won't find one. Supporters of this amendment claim that they are putting America first, and I disagree. America leads because other nations choose to train with us, to fight alongside of us, and to learn from us. Choosing isolation over influence does not make America stronger. It makes America smaller. If members are concerned about capacity at these service academies, then let's expand that capacity and fund additional cadets or more ROTC, create more opportunities for more Americans to serve. But do not dismantle a program that has quietly strengthened American national security for generations. That's not a stronger defense, it is a weaker one. And yet another example of how undervalued and misunderstood American soft power is by this administration. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves.
I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I would like to yield 1 minute of my time to my esteemed chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Chairman Rogers.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank the gentlelady. This amendment strikes a provision that prohibits the enrollment of Chinese, Russian, Iranian, and North Korean students at our military academies and replaces it with an outright ban on all foreign students, including our allies. The fact is, there is tremendous benefit in having our cadets study and train alongside cadets of our allies and partners. Furthermore, the law requires that allies who send students must pay the full tuition, room and board expenses so that the U.S. taxpayer is not paying a dime for those foreign students. The law also requires these students to be vetted by Homeland Security, state, and DOW to ensure they are not a threat. Finally, the law caps the number of accepted caps the number so that no Americans are displaced by the foreign students. The underlying bill already codifies the prohibition on students from our adversaries. We shouldn't extend that prohibition to our allies. As such, I oppose this amendment.
Gentlewoman reserves.
I reserve.
Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this is an example of what the American people are frustrated with right now. We have a majority here. The American people gave Republicans a trifecta, and every time that Republicans step up to put America first, to make our industries, our military, our economy stronger, we side with Democrats to limit those capabilities. I talk with Americans from coast to coast, from our southern border to our northern border, from the heartland of America to the Rocky Mountains. People want us to do the right thing and put Americans first. This is a common sense amendment that reserves these special limited opportunities for American citizens. Our service academies, again, should remain focused on producing American military leaders for the American armed forces. And when we see this kind of behavior of crossing the aisle to limit these possibilities for Americans, it is exactly why people back home watch us here on the House floor and get frustrated. Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I would like to yield 1 minute of my time to my friend and colleague and fellow member of the Armed Services Committee, Representative Al Frith.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment that would prohibit international students from attending our United States military academies, including the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, where I have the privilege of representing. Mr. Speaker, this short-sighted, isolationist amendment would have a serious negative impact on U.S. foreign partnerships with allied and friendly forces. For decades, foreign military officers have attended the United States military service academies with strong bipartisan support. This program actually makes our military and our national security stronger. Thousands of these officers have gone on to serve as reliable military partners to their U.S. counterparts and strengthen diplomatic and military ties. And let's be clear, American students benefit just as much. They benefit from this program by gaining experience working with officers from allied nations in a controlled environment before entering a coalition operation. In fact, U.S. officers are more confident in partnering with international counterparts who graduated from the academies as they share a common education in military strategy and doctrine. International students also only occupy a very limited number of positions. Only 1% of midshipmen are international students.
30 more seconds.
Joel is recognized.
Thank you. Which means these students do not impact the opportunities for qualified American counterparts. And again, the countries sending these international students foot the entire bill. This is not on U.S. taxpayers. As Russia and China actively educate foreign military officers to expand their influence, the U.S. needs to maintain this program so that partner nations don't seek an education elsewhere. Fundamentally, this amendment is misguided, it's xenophobic, and it does not understand the utility and value of educating international students. Every featured allied chief of defense who trained in the U.S. is a strategic asset that would be nearly impossible to replicate through diplomacy alone. That is the true intent and value of the program. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, again, I urge my colleagues to support Chip Roy's amendment, number 1304, and put American cadets first.
Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek
I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer Amendment Number 3 as the designee for Mr. Roy.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of amendment number 1300. Our nation's military service academies exist to develop officers for the United States Armed Forces. Every cadet and midshipman receives a world-class education funded by the American taxpayer in exchange for a commitment to serve our country. This amendment restores a longstanding cap on the number of cadets who may be released early to pursue professional athletics. Exceptional athletic talent is something we certainly should celebrate, but the primary mission of our service academies is military service, not professional sports. This amendment helps ensure that early releases remain the exception, not the rule. It preserves a longstanding balance our services academies have maintained for years. Our military academies should remain focused on preparing leaders of character for our military as Congress intended. I urge my colleagues to support amendment number 1300 offered by Chip Roy of Texas. Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purposes does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I yield such time as he may consume to the chairman, Mr. Rogers.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank my friend. President Trump has made it a priority to ensure that our cadets and midshipmen are treated like other college athletes and are able to compete on a level playing field with other Division I universities. The current statutory limit of 5 slots per year for cadets and midshipmen to, quote, go pro is burdensome and prevents superior athletes from choosing to attend a service academy. These folks will still need to satisfy a 5 to 8 year service obligation in the reserves, where they will be an effective recruiting force for our military academies. As such, I respectfully oppose this amendment.
Gentleman reserves.
Yes, I reserve.
Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
I would just associate myself with I would yield myself such time as it may consume, and I associate myself with the remarks of Chairman Rogers, agree with his reasons for opposing it, and urge the body to oppose. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized. The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Sorry. You need more time, Mike? I yield back.
Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I rise to offer amendment number 4 as the designee of Mr. Roy.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of my colleague Chip Roy's amendment number 1301. This amendment strikes the pilot program that would authorize voice analysis technology as a substitute for additional drug testing. Our armed forces rely on proven standards to ensure military readiness, maintain good order and discipline, and uphold public confidence. Traditional drug testing has long served as a reliable and established tool in meeting these objectives. Before replacing a proven system with a new and untested technology, Congress should be confident that the alternative has demonstrated the same level of reliability and effectiveness. This amendment takes a straightforward approach. It maintains the current standard rather than authorizing a pilot program to substitute for traditional drug testing. Our military deserves policies built on proven methods, not unnecessary experimentation. I urge my colleagues to support Amendment number 1301. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition today to the Roy Amendment. Section 518 is a limited responsible pilot. It authorizes but does not require the Secretary of War to test a risk-informed approach to drug testing using voice-based assessment to help target where physical testing is actually warranted. It does not replace it. It stays inside the existing drug demand reduction program. It comes with privacy protections and a report back to this committee within 1 year, and it sunsets automatically with no action after 3 years. This amendment would kill that pilot before the department ever has the chance to evaluate it. The Department of War spends roughly $120 million a year on drug testing and burns more than 4.6 million service member hours doing it, even though only a small fraction of tests ever come back positive. A risk-informed approach could return millions of those hours to training and mission execution and save the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars every year. This is not about weakening drug testing. The statute requires the pilot to preserve deterrence, readiness, and good order and discipline. It's about testing whether we can apply our standards more intelligently instead of spreading the same blunt process across a force that is overwhelmingly clean. This is a readiness issue. It's a taxpayer issue, and it is a service member dignity issue all at once. The Roy Amendment defends an expensive, outdated status quo over a cautious, measurable pilot that has built-in oversight. Congress should be encouraging this kind of disciplined modernization, not blocking it before the Department of War ever gets the data. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment and preserve Section 518. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chair,
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
I request a recorded vote and for the temperature to be turned up in here a little bit.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. The chair understands that Amendment 5 will not be offered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to H.Res. 1438, I offer amendments en bloc.
The clerk will designate the amendments en bloc.
On block number 1, consisting of amendments numbered 10, 11, 13, 16, 21, 23, 24, 25, 29, 31, 32, 33, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, and 104, printed in Part A of House Report Number 119-755, offered by Mr. Rogers of Alabama.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. McCollum.
Nice.
I thank the ranking member, and Mr. Chair, I rise in opposition to the Hill Amendment in En bloc 2, which would reauthorize the Defense Production Act for 5 years. This administration has shown exactly how it intends to use the Defense Production Act authorizing to preempt state and local law, to bypass tribal consultation, and to take equity stakes in mining companies when it benefits the administration's allies and some family members. As a former state legislator, I'm particularly concerned about the administration's weaponization of the Defense Production Act to override state and local laws that are enacted to protect our communities. The Defense Production Act is an important tool for the DoD to work with our industrial base to meet our national security needs, and that does not mean Congress should reauthorize sweeping emergency powers without real guardrails. We need language that protects tribal consultation, prohibits the waiving of environmental laws, and institutes strong oversight and anti-corruption measures. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment, and I yield back, and I thank the House for its patience with the issue I was having with my throat. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I have no speakers, and I urge adoption of the en bloc package. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields.
We're done. Okay. I, too, have no speakers and also urge adoption of the en bloc package and yield back.
Gentleman yields. The question is on the amendments en bloc offered by the gentleman from Alabama. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The en bloc amendments are agreed to. order to consider amendment number 6, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purposes?
Amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Mr. Hunt of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hunt, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. As a West Point graduate and Army combat veteran, I want to begin by thanking the members of the Armed Service Committee. You all have put forth legislation that protects our troops and helps ensure the United States remains ahead of its adversaries. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to offer my amendments today. From my time in uniform, I know firsthand that the brave men and women who raise their hands to defend this country are the backbone of our military. Especially with the conflict in Iran today, I'm grateful more than ever that our sons and daughters are keeping us safe here at home and abroad. But another essential pillar of military strength is energy. Without it, our jets don't fly, our ships don't sail, and our weapon systems do not function properly. Energy security is not merely an economic concern, it is a national security concern, and that is why I am grateful for the opportunity to offer Amendment 818 to hopefully be included in the NDAA. Amendment 818 would strengthen and secure the domestic energy supply chain that supports defense installations across the country. Today, California imports nearly 70% of all of its oil from foreign countries, and 30% of that oil comes from the Middle East. It's not hyperbole to say that California has become dependent on the very oil that Iran is attempting to control through the Strait of Hormuz. This has led to a spike in gasoline prices for California residents, but it has also exemplified why our military installations should not be reliant solely on foreign oil. Washington State imports nearly 50% of its oil from abroad, despite having critical Navy and Air Force bases that need energy. And to prove this point one last time, Hawaii, home of the U.S. Pacific Command, relies almost entirely on foreign oil, 90% to be exact. 60% of Hawaii's oil comes from Argentina, 15% from Libya, and nearly 10% from Nigeria. How could one of our most significant military commands be 90% foreign oil? We could do it right here in our own country, specifically my own home state of Texas. However, we export hundreds of billions of dollars of energy from my home state. And despite these serious supply chain risks, companies working to address them too often face frivolous litigation from climate groups, even when those lawsuits weaken our military readiness. Amendment 818, supported by the Department of War and HASC Subcommittee Chairman Bergman, would help address frivolous litigation targeting companies that supply our military installations with energy. If the United States finds itself in a conflict with China, the last thing that our military should face is a jet fuel shortage caused by baseless litigation tying up our domestic energy producers. Importantly, this amendment does not lower environmental permitting standards or weaken existing reporting requirements. This legislation merely secures a supply chain that is heavily dependent on foreign countries that could be weaponized against us if we don't fix it now. If we are serious about our military readiness, I respectfully ask that the chamber vote yes on amendment number 818, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Claim 5 minutes in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm trying to figure out if this is a drill baby drill or is this just get even with California. This really sounds strange to me, that the state that so much wants to have the federal government not messing with that state, the state of Texas, that the representative from Texas would put forth an amendment that would specifically remove California's ability to regulate energy operations within the state of California. I would hope that the application of this might just as well go to the state of Texas as it does to California, and perhaps I'll propose an amendment that that be the case. But the reality is that this is not good public policy. There are many, many reasons why an energy project should not be built. Maybe it's because it goes right through a school or destroys a community. Maybe it's because there are environmental issues or economic issues. But this would simply give to, in this case, the Secretary of War, Mr. Hegseth, the opportunity to say that, oh, this energy project in California is necessary, even though it may have little or anything to do with the current war effort in Iran or any other place. I don't get it. I don't get it. If you're really interested in states' rights, why you would be proposing this amendment, and particularly if you happen to be from Texas, which may be the center of states' rights. So here we go. Here we go. What are we doing here? If you're a tribal government and you want to put a pipeline through that tribal land, the tribal government has absolutely nothing to say about it if the secretary certifies that it's necessary for defense. Or maybe it's a community. Or maybe it happens to be a river or a lake. All the secretary has to say is, hey, this is necessary for national defense. Come on. This is bad, bad public policy. And with that, I reserve the remaining time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I reserve my time, and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves.
Well, we seem to be fighting over who gets the last word, so let me take a shot at the last word. If you are interested in the power of a state to regulate its environment, to regulate its communities and roads and streets and rivers and lakes, then you should be opposed to this amendment. Why would we do this? National defense? This has little to do with national defense. It has everything to do with sticking it to California. So with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentleman has the only time remaining.
I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized. He yielded. Yeah. The gentleman without objection may reclaim his time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized. The gentleman from Texas is recognized. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. I oppose this amendment. We know that the military does not need this provision to ensure a stable supply. We already are the largest oil producer in the world, producing nearly 14 million barrels of oil a day. So let's be clear. This is not about energy independence or national security. It's about giving big oil special treatment at the expense of California. Under this amendment, a single certification from the Secretary of Defense unlocks sweeping legal protections for fossil fuel projects. States and local governments cannot interfere. Courts are told to presume that delaying this project harms national security on the Secretary's word alone. And we know what that means. Challengers cannot dispute the Secretary's determination, and developers receive procedural advantages that no other litigant enjoys, including the ability to essentially choose which federal court will hear a challenge. It is interesting to me that this amendment is sponsored by Congressman Hunt from Houston, where Sable Offshore Oil headquarters is located. Sable Offshore, of course, is the operator of the San Ynez pipeline system, which the Trump administration forced back online over the objections of California. This is the pipeline that caused devastating refugio oil spill in 2015 in my district. My constituents who must live with the risk this operation poses are overwhelmingly opposed. But the Trump administration used the Defense Production Act to preempt state law. The state of California is challenging that authority in court. I guess Sable is worried about losing in court, as they should be, because this amendment would allow the company to avoid accountability by moving to a more favorable court, blocking the California lawsuit and preventing any court from issuing an injunction against this project. So let me be clear. Again, this isn't about national security. This is a bailout for polluters. I oppose this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to also vote no. I reserve.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Texas has the only time remaining, so the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much. This is, in fact, an issue of national security. And as somebody that is from Texas, what I understand very clearly is that we don't need fewer electrons, we need more. And while we are looking for the next abundant source of energy for the future, we ain't getting there, unfortunately, for many people in this room on the other side of the aisle, without energy and oil and gas, especially when it comes to putting fuel in the Apache helicopter that I flew in combat 55 times, to supplying energy for our forces abroad and for our allies abroad as well. And the only thing that we are trying to do is make sure that we produce it safer, cleaner, and better here in this country than anywhere in the entire world. And with that, I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized to close. Does the gentleman yield back?
And I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields. So the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 7, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
To offer my amendment 1085.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Mr. Hunt of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hunt, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Amendment 1085 addresses a very similar challenge as Amendment 818, but through a more targeted approach. This amendment would require the U.S. Army to acquire easement along the San Ynez pipeline in California. Not property ownership, but an easement. For more than a century, the U.S. Army has used its existing authority under Title 10 to acquire easements that protect critical supply chains. During World War II, the United States government routinely condemned land that was used to build ammunition plants to supply our troops in Europe. In 1941, when U-boats threatened tanker routes supplying the Northeast, Congress gave the government condemnation authority for pipelines right of way. The impact of that legislation ensured that the war effort in Europe was kept fueled. Amendment 1085 follows that same proven model. A federal property interest securing a privately operated fuel corridor our military depends on. California agencies and state legislators have filed repeated lawsuits against the pipeline in an effort to shut it down, even though California imports almost 70% of its oil. About half of the oil California imports is from the oil that transits through the Strait of Hormuz. This should not be an acceptable acquisition method for our defense installations that need energy to carry out not their, but our mission. It is no secret in Washington that one of the biggest threats the United States faces, and the whole world for that matter, is the threat of the Chinese invasion of Taiwan, and we must be prepared for this should it happen in the not-so-distant future. We must keep our military installations fueled and energized by domestic sources if we are to maintain deterrence. Along that, we also want to ensure that we don't engage in any conflict in the Pacific. Amendment 1085 would affirm that this pipeline is important to national security to keep our military on the West Coast supplied with domestic sourced energy. Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Chair recognizes. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I rise to claim the time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is an outrageous attack on states' rights, dressed up as a fake energy emergency. My colleague refers to a national emergency during World War II, where the Army and our country's posture was different. The current environment is not legitimate. It is not a legitimate war environment, as he refers to from the past. Let us be clear about what this does. It would allow the federal government to seize California's owned lands through eminent domain for the San Ynez pipeline system. This is the same pipeline that caused the devastating 2015 oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara in my district. Instead of trying to restore it to safe operating condition, Sable has spent years ignoring and evading California law to try to restart this operation and not using the latest and best technology available. California State Fire Marshal has already indicated the pipeline is not in safe operating condition. But Sable does not think a little thing like state laws or the health and safety of our coasts should stand in the way of their profits. At the company's request, the administration stripped California of its oversight of the pipeline and used the Defense Production Act to force it to restart operations. And this was before this illegitimate Iran war. But apparently, that was not enough. Now Sable is asking its friends in Congress to rig the system in favor, seize California lands, and issue an irrevocable operating permit. Yes, these are friends from another state. Let's talk about the hypocrisy here. What happened to states' rights? This is the most blatant example of corrupt federal overreach. So why aren't my colleagues across the aisle up in arms? Oh, because it's not convenient. So one should be able to use the federal government as their personal trump card to trample on state laws and regulations for their personal profit, no matter the party, no matter the state. Unfortunately, this amendment fits a broader pattern of attacks on California by this administration, attacking our clean air standards, undermining our offshore wind industry, and now trying to bulldoze our environmental protections for big oil, a big oil handout. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this dangerous project and the precedent it sets. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.
I'll continue to reserve, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman from Texas then is recognized.
Prepared to close.
Gentleman from Texas is prepared to close. The gentleman from California is recognized to close. Oh, he closes first.
Mr. Chair, how much time?
Sorry. Gentleman from California has 3 minutes. Gentleman from California has 2 minutes. Gentleman from Texas has 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'll yield 1 minute to Representative Garamendi.
Oh, we can do that. Very good. The gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, is recognized for 1 minute.
We need to be very, very clear about what this is all about. This is about a company, one company, using the Congress and the power of this Congress to feather its nest, to conduct an oil exploration program off the coast of California that can and has in the past been extremely detrimental to the communities in California and to the environment of California. We ought not be doing this for any single company. This is not a national security issue, and certainly not a national defense issue. This is about Sable using this Congress to further enrich itself at the expense of California, the environment, the communities along the coast, and particularly the communities in Santa Barbara County. I urge a strong no vote.
Gentleman from California yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
You have 3 minutes, correct?
Yes, Mr. Hunt has 3 minutes.
Oil is a globally traded commodity. This is a one-team, one-fight conversation. It doesn't matter which state you are from, oil production for the United States and every electron that we are able to produce is very critical to our national defense and to the needs of not just the United States, but also our allies. We in Texas fully understand that, but it's time for the entire country to understand that we have got to get in this fight together if we're going to continue to have abundant energy sources for the future so we can live the lives we have been accustomed to living and continue to defend this great nation. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back the remainder of his time. The gentleman from California is recognized and, just as a reminder, has 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, I'm a Marine. I served our country. I know what it's like to fight for our country and stand up and be ready to be called when we need to do so. But to use the Production Defense Act for a frivolous reason undermines our democracy, undermines the integrity of what we're about, and when we really need to use it, it makes a mockery of us. Mr. Chair, this is ludicrous. We should not proceed forward with this amendment. I reserve.
The gentleman is closing at the moment.
I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question now is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chair.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in Part A of House Report Number 119-755. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of Amendment Number 8, and I urge its adoption.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 8, printed in Part A of House Report Number 119-755, offered by Mr. Gallagher of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentleman from California, Mr. Gallagher, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of Amendment Number 8, and I urge its adoption by this body. My amendment requires the federal government to take a hard look at how the collapse of America's domestic refining capacity threatens our national security and military readiness, and what tools exist when state-level actions undermine refining capacity, as they have in California, and thus undermine our armed forces that we rely upon. For years, dangerous and, quite frankly, stupid California policy led by Gavin Newsom and Sacramento Democrats have waged an ideological war on the oil and gas industry, and thus California's refining industry has been decimated by crushing regulations and Green New Deal mandates. Today, California produces less than 23% of the oil and gas that it consumes and imports more than 65% of its crude oil from foreign countries, places like Venezuela, like Ecuador, like the Middle East. Some of these countries with horrendous environmental records, rainforests that are being burned down as we speak, and we're shutting down domestic production that we have in Kern County to our own detriment. And meanwhile, what has happened to our gas prices in California? They have spiked to the highest in the nation, Just now today, the average price of gas in California, $5.50 a gallon. You know what it is in North Carolina? $3.72 a gallon. That's policy. That's what we're talking about. And our jet fuel supplies have been reduced by 1 million gallons. This is due to the loss of the Valero refinery in the East Bay and the Phillips 66 refinery in Los Angeles. All due to policy that Gavin Newsom championed, and in fact said he jammed his legislature to accomplish that policy, and it has had horrendous effects. California is also home to 32 military installations, including some of our nation's most strategically important bases: Travis Air Force Base, Naval Air Weapons Station at China Lake, Naval Base San Diego, Camp Pendleton, and Beale Air Force Base, just to name a few. Our service members cannot train, deploy, or fight without reliable access to fuel. Congress should not and cannot stand by while California's failed energy policies undermine the energy infrastructure our military depends on. As the saying goes, energy security is national security. My amendment simply directs that the federal government identify what can be done to protect the rest of the refining capacity that we have in California that's essential to the West Coast and is essential to America's national defense. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense amendment. I can't imagine why the opposing party would ever oppose this when we need affordable energy now. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves?
I reserve my time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
California reserves. The gentleman from California is, or for what purpose, excuse me, for what purpose does the gentleman from California?
I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I served in North Carolina in Camp Lejeune. I know the weather there. I know North Carolina. And I also know why I live in California. I'm opposed to this amendment. Once again, this amendment has nothing to do with national security, as much as people want to say that over and over and over. It has everything to do with politically motivated attacks on state policies that the other side of the aisle happens to disagree with. Just call it what it is. It specifically requires a report on ways for the federal government to preempt state laws, including, once again, through national security waivers. Oh, how far the principled have fallen. I thought the Republican Party was the party of states' rights, maybe selective state rights. But apparently that principle only applies when they agree with the state's policies. But let's call it what it is, selective. This amendment would strip states of their ability to adopt stronger protections for their communities' air, water, and public health. Unfortunately, it appears that states' rights take a back seat when there's a favor to be done for big oil. This amendment is a roadmap for the federal government to undermine states that choose to protect their residents. In places like California, communities have fought for stronger safeguards against pollution, environmental hazards, not weaker ones. And that's why we also believe in renewable energy, something this administration does not. If we were really concerned about energy and diversifying our energy capacity, we would support offshore wind. This president has gone to great lengths to kill offshore wind projects in California. So let's not talk about energy supply when we are doing everything possible to just give a handout to the oil industry. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Gentleman from California reserves. The other gentleman from California is recognized.
I reserve my time as well, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield to Representative Garamendi.
Gentleman from California is recognized for...
Inquire as to the time remaining.
Gentleman from California has 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes.
I yield 2.5 minutes to Mr. Garamendi, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Well, now, isn't this an interesting amendment? I happen to represent all of Northern California's oil refineries, all 5 of them. And yes, things are changing, not just because it's necessary for all the environmental reasons that we should be aware of and that seem to be totally ignored by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but the reality is there really is a need for the kind of projects that my colleague from Santa Barbara just spoke to, offshore wind. Why is it this administration is killing the offshore wind projects in California? Why is this administration killing the solar and geothermal projects in California? And now we would have from our Republican colleagues some crying about whether we ought to give an open door to our refineries so that they can do anything they want to do. And we're going to use the comptroller of the Department of Defense to write some sort of a document about why it's necessary. The reality is we need to move forward. The refineries are going to go forward. It may very well be that some in Northern California, as in Southern California, will shut down. Why? Because there's a dramatic change that is occurring in this nation as to how we're going to use energy. Why would we want to stop that process? This makes very, very bad public policy that we've used the comptroller to do what should be done by the staff of the minority party. With that, I yield back my time and reserve.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, yields. The gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal, reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Gallagher, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good that my colleague from California brought up principle because his party used to be the party of the working class. But it certainly no longer is that with $5.50 a gallon gas. The working class in California is being decimated. And you know what else is happening? Those good-paying refinery jobs in Benicia, California, that used to be the Valero refinery, are gone because of bad policy. And those people no longer have those jobs. So yes, you're right, we should be talking about principle. We should be talking about actually serving our constituents who have been plagued with the worst energy prices in the nation. But don't belie the argument. This is about national security because we have all of those bases that I mentioned on the West Coast. They need that fuel supply. They need that jet fuel that they can no longer get from Benicia. They can no longer rely on that. This is absolutely germane to national defense. And what are they so worried about? This amendment is simply calling for a review. It's calling for a study to see what we can do. Are you afraid of what it might find? My colleagues, are you afraid of what it might find that your policy, far from being one that is diverse and that looks to all forms of energy, has put all of its eggs in one basket, solar and wind, to great detriment? We should be looking at all forms of energy, and including our oil and gas. We produce oil and gas in Kern County safely, environmentally friendly, and instead you're importing it from countries that have no such record, sir. So absolutely, I decry what you are saying today. I decry California's policy. It deserves a review. And we should be using the federal government to ensure that our refinery capacity stays stable, that it's affordable, and that it is ready for our men and women of the military. And so again, I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. It is germane. It is much needed in these times. Thank you, and I yield back my time, Mr.
Gentleman's
Speaker.
time's expired. The gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Boy, I think I heard my colleague supports offshore wind, which is in contrast with the president. So I'm assuming he disagrees with the president. I'm willing to reserve and yield to get an answer on that.
Mr. Carbajal is recognized.
I'll reserve and ask, or yield and ask for an answer to that question. I kind of heard he supported offshore wind.
Mr. Carvajal's time has expired. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Gallagher. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 9, printed in Part A of House Report 119-755. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-755, offered by Mr. Carter of Georgia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1438, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2027. This amendment addresses a serious defense industrial base and national security issue, ensuring the United States can efficiently recycle, recover, and reuse materials from defense articles and scrap metal without being blocked by inconsistent state and local rules. Our military depends on secure and reliable access to strategic and critical materials. At a time when China controls or influences major portions of global critical mineral and metal supply chains, the United States cannot afford to waste recoverable materials from our own defense systems, equipment, and munitions. This amendment ensures that the physical or mechanical processing of scrap metal, as well as the disposition and recycling of defense articles, is governed by a clear federal standard rather than a patchwork of conflicting state and local requirements. While this amendment is expressly focused on critical metals that often incorporate sensitive military technology, the amendment prevents non-identical state or local rules in this narrow area while preserving applicable federal standards. It is limited in scope to ensure chemical treatment, stabilization, fixation, and neutralization of waste are expressly excluded, preserving state authority over hazardous chemical processes and maintaining existing environmental protections. We've repeatedly heard from both Republicans and Democrats a litany of concerns over how dependent the United States is on foreign sources for critical minerals. We know how incredibly difficult it is to build a new mine and refining capacity in the United States. I would like to hope that we can at least come together and agree to keeping sensitive technology and the materials that can be recovered from our military equipment within the domestic supply chain. This is not about lowering safety or environmental standards. This is not about lowering safety or environmental standards. The amendment is narrowly focused on physical and mechanical scrap processing and defense article recycling. It does not cover chemical treatment, stabilization, fixation, or neutralization of waste generated by that processing. At a time of growing global instability, we should be doing everything possible to strengthen domestic supply chains, reduce dependence on adversaries, and support the defense industrial base. This amendment is a common sense national security measure that helps ensure critical materials from defense articles can be responsibly recovered, recycled, and reused for America's security needs. I respectfully urge my colleagues to support this amendment and its inclusion in the NDAA, and I reserve the time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California. For
Mr.
what
Chair,
purpose?
I rise to claim the time in opposition to the amendment.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose the amendment. Don't get me wrong. I am glad to see my colleagues across the aisle recognize that recycling needs to be part of our minerals and materials strategy. We absolutely should be recovering valuable materials instead of relying entirely on new mining. But this amendment isn't really about recycling, is it? It is another attempt to use national security as a phony justification to override state laws that this majority doesn't like. What happened to states' rights again? Are we being selective again It would prevent states and local governments from enforcing requirements governing the recycling and disposal of defense material law. Many states and localities have adopted stronger safeguards to protect communities from pollution and industrial hazards. And we know that defense equipment can pose significant risks to surrounding communities. In an era where this administration is trying to roll back every single environmental and public health protection it can, an amendment like this is particularly dangerous. I know, I served in the Marine Corps. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee. I strongly oppose, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman's time reserved. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, will you make sure that the gentleman is looking at the same amendment that I am proposing here, because he obviously does not understand it. This is not about lowering safety or environmental standards. This amendment is narrowly focused on physical and mechanical scrap processing and defense article recycling. It doesn't cover chemical treatment. It doesn't cover stabilization, fixation, or neutralization of waste generated by that processing. Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I ask you to make sure he's looking at the right amendment here, and I reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from California.
I don't know what they teach in Georgia, but in California, let me tell you, we learn how to read and write. I understand this amendment. And with that, let me yield 2 minutes to Representative Garamendi.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the fourth amendment in a row that basically preempts state laws of many different kinds. And frankly, I don't understand why we're doing this. I didn't understand, but I've come to understand we're doing this for a specific company that now has a contract to recycle military equipment at the Sierra Depot in California. Basically, what this amendment does is to reduce or to eliminate any California law about recycling, the safety of it, the disposition of the hazardous materials, and the way in which they may be affecting the land, the people, or the environment. Unless if the California law is different from the federal law. And in reality, there may be no federal law whatsoever. So we're faced with a situation here of totally removing the ability of the state, any state actually, this isn't just for California, this is for every state, the ability of the state to regulate the recycling and the disposition of hazardous materials in the state of California, defense materials. Why would we do that? What's the logic behind this except to benefit a single company, which is exactly what this does? Why would we do that? Just like the previous three amendments, benefiting one company, Sable Company. So here we are, taking our time, providing a specific opportunity for that company to operate. With regard to the Sierra facility, I'm familiar with it. I'm also familiar with the federal laws in that area. They do not protect the people who are doing the work. They do not protect the community.
Gentleman's time has
around
expired.
The depot.
Gentleman's time's expired.
I yield back.
Understand why they want to cut off their nose in spite of their face. This is national security here, Mr. Speaker. This is not trying to preempt the laws. It is narrowly focused. We are talking about recycling national defense materials that include critical minerals, scrap metal. And for the life of me, I don't understand how this is benefiting one company. It is benefiting the United States of America. This is recycling. This is environmentally safe, environmentally sound, environmentally friendly. Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
In California, we really believe it's important to protect the public health of our constituents. So I'm flabbergasted that this is trying to undermine the standards that we want to have to protect our public health from hazardous and toxic materials. Now, if you live in another state and the people want to have lesser standards for hazardous materials that could damage their public health, hurt their public health, that's one thing. But to try to undermine those standards in California is another. This amendment does exactly that. It tries to undermine the will of the state of California and its people. With that, I'll reserve.
Gentleman from California reserves.
Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker,
from
how much
California is
time?
recognized. You have 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, again, this is common sense legislation. This is not trying to benefit one company. This is trying to benefit the United States of America, both environmentally and, more importantly, our national security. It is recycling material of critical minerals that we need. It ensures that the physical and the mechanical processing of scrap metal, as well as the disposition and recycling of defense articles, is governed by a clear federal standard rather than a patchwork of